Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 7th episode of the Avocado Gamescast, the AV Club After Dark's gaming podcast. I'm Merve, and we've got a great podcast lined up for you today. We'll be talking about DLC and death, though some might argue that they're the same thing. But first, let's meet the people who are joining me today. First up, he's picketing outside Konami's offices until they bring back Suikoden. It's PT.
Metal Gear Zombies isn't good enough.
I agree. Next up, he got his name from one of Blondie's lesser-known songs. It's Lord Stoneheart.
Hello.
And finally, he's got enough graphics cards to render a Pixar film. Too bad he's just using them to play video games. It's TheKappa.
What's up, guys?
How are you guys all doing?
Good.
Yeah, great.
Great, glad to hear it. Oh, you're also doing well. Everybody's doing well. Glad to hear that. So that we can get acquainted with everyone, why don't we start by sharing what we're playing at the moment? Lord Stoneheart, what have you been playing?
So yesterday I bought Jotun Valhalla edition for the Wii U.
Oh, what kind of game is that?
So it's an action game. You control a character and you get attacked by swarms of enemies and such, and you fight these giant bosses, the titular Jotuns. It's pretty cool. It's, as you can guess from the name, it's based off Norse mythology. And it has really cool art in it.
Yeah, it's hand drawn, right? It's very it almost looks like a 1980s Disney or something like that. It's very cool style. I remember that.
That's really neat. So gameplay-wise, it's sort of like Fury or Shadow of the Colossus. Is it that kind of game where we're fighting these big enemies in sequence?
I've heard of Shadow of the Colossus. I'm not entirely sure, but it sounds like it. So there's stuff in between the boss battles.
The main highlight is
are like the main meat of the game, so to speak.
If I'm not wrong, I've only read a little bit about it, but just to kind of give you a little bit of an update, it's less about killing the giants, unless I'm wrong, and it's more about kind of like impressing them through feats and stuff like that. I haven't actually played the game, but
I'm admittedly not very far into it because I got it late last night and I haven't had that much time today. I've only beaten the first 5 giants, I believe, but it's definitely it's killing the giants in order to impress Odin.
Okay.
Just to clarify, this apparently was on Steam first, and just today was released. Today, I mean September 9th, as we're recording this, was released on PS4, Xbox One, and the Wii U. And those who originally owned the original edition on Steam gets the Valhalla edition for free. So
that's pretty cool. I like when they do stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's not going to matter for the people listening to this, but for the next 39 hours or so, it is half off on Steam.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Steam page right now. It's $7.50 if you want to pick it up.
I'm considering it, actually.
Yeah. You're making me buy games, Stoneheart. Making me spend money. Have you been playing anything else, or is that it? Or
so my other games, I've been playing Pillars of Eternity, which I got last March. I haven't beaten it yet. I just completed the first part of the White March expansion.
How are you liking that? Because I really love the base game, but I haven't gotten around to the expansions yet. But I've heard good things. I heard they're an actual genuine expansion.
Yeah. It reminds me a bit like how Baldur's Gate handled its expansion.
Right. Back in the day, people had actual expansion packs.
But it's definitely like a whole new area. But it's sort of an area you complete a bit before you would be near finishing the game.
All right.
I'm excited. I mean, I know me and you have talked a couple times about our party composition for Pillars, and I mean, I go back and forth, but I'm feeling a replay pretty soon, and I'm going to commit to this. I'm not going to use any of the companions. I'm just going to use all my own created characters and see where it goes from there. And I think it's going to be an interesting game because I'll be able to balance my party completely, but I'm probably going to miss, I don't even know how many side quests. An absolute ton, because a lot of them are unlocked through party members.
There are a lot of party members in that game,
yeah.
if I remember correctly.
Yeah, quite especially when you the total expansion has 3 more. So
Wow.
That's gonna.
Do they finally give you a barbarian?
yes, the part 2 adds a barbarian, and you can get it, but you can get the barbarian pretty shortly into the part 1.
Oh. Okay, I'll have to give it a shot then.
Yeah. And then I haven't quite started playing it yet, but apparently a few months ago, an updated English translation patch was made for Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War. It's one of the Fire Emblem games that was only released in Japan, so there's only fan translation of it. But apparently this patch has finally fixed something that actually lets you see the ending, which wasn't translated before. So
I'm just gonna take a guess, and with it being a JRPG, I'm gonna guess that the church is somehow the bad guy.
there is an evil dragon cult.
Oh, okay. That was close.
Well,
There is an evil religion. That's what
Fire Emblem, yeah.
The best way I can describe the story is, it's like Game of Thrones. If the point of the incest in Game of Thrones was to create a child who could be a vessel for an evil dragon.
Seriously? All right.
Yeah, it's, as I said, it was only released in Japan, so I don't think it's making its way over here because of that.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it.
I don't know. Game of Thrones is kind of normalized incest in fiction, not incest in real life. Thankfully,
I don't think Nintendo's good. Well, I say that,
yeah,
but there was
thing.
some questionable stuff in the last Fire Emblem game, so who knows?
Yeah,
There were
Nintendo.
some minor edits relationship-wise to Fates, yeah, which didn't affect the game all that much, but
Yeah, and then there's the relation. You can have like the main character have relationships with characters they called their siblings for most of their life, and that's another topic.
yeah, that's a definite another topic. Yes.
Yeah, that's some gray area. All right, PT, what have you been playing?
I've been kind of sticking to, I mean, there is one major game here, but I've been kind of sticking to more casual stuff, just to kind of get rid of my backlog and just to kind of get away from so-called heavy games. I mean, games where you have to like put so much attention to them and such. And the first one is actually a solitaire game. It's something like, I guess you would call this reverse solitaire, but the game is a Regency solitaire. It's a game where there's essentially a puzzle game where you have where you do the basic rules of solitaire, grab a card that is higher or lower, than, everyone knows how to play solitaire. But there are many obstacles in your way, including, key locks that, lock down, certain areas of the board, or ribbons that require you to, take a card twice. And you earn gold that will gain power-ups, like where you can use an arrow to shoot a card off the board, or push this phoenix to burn up 2 of the other cards. I mean, it's very silly, though the power-up system adds kind of a lot to an already pretty interesting, a lot of interesting, depth to it. I mean, so sometimes the RNG will screw you regardless, where you're just looking for a king or a queen and you're not getting it there at all. The plot of the
RNG
game
in a puzzle game can be frustrating. For sure.
God. I have so many Puzzle Quest stories of just, there's no way that drop would happen the way it did if it wasn't cheating.
Wasn't Puzzle Quest, didn't they straight up admit that they were cheating?
They did. They came out and they removed it for Galactrix, and the game was about 1 trillion times easier. But they basically said that it was like an artificial difficulty level. But I don't want to derail you too much, but man, I'll tell you that's one of those things that just... Whew.
It reminds me a little of rubber banding in racing games, actually.
Yeah, it's very similar, right? It's like, if you're so good at it, the computer has to play fair, and the only way the computer can do that is by cheating, because if you're dominating the board, not much of a game.
But yeah, this is a pretty, innocent little game. I mean, the story is a minimal, charming little bit about a narrative about this lady who falls in love with this royalty of sorts, but her family's kind of fallen on hard times because she has siblings that have basically gambled away their fortune. And so it's just this slow little, I get to be a princess at the ball thing, and it's kind of adorable. It's totally harmless. There are other games like this out there. I was going to mention something I believe came out it was a couple of years ago. It's called Fairy Solitaire. It's a similar game in many respects, similar power-up, similar setup. The fantasy story inside that game is terrible. With like lots of voice acting where I just don't care. You're bad there. But no, if you want an alternative to this game, I mean, I'd recommend both definitely. Fairy Solitaire is the second game there. But yeah, these games are both good time wasters. They don't require much attention. I mean, even for, I believe you can put both of them in Windows and like on a second monitor just occasionally flip back and forth and such. But yeah, I think casual games like this are great, and especially when they're as polished as they are. The second game is something I've been meaning to finish because it's only about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I felt bad just kind of leaving it there. But it's a visual novel sort of game. It's Sibble, spelled Cibele. I believe it is pronounced Sibul, Sib-ul, kind of pronunciation-wise. It's a game created by a few developers. They kind of call themselves Star Made Games, but the lead person is a lady named Nina Freeman, who is currently a level designer with Fulbright, who were the makers of Gone Home, and she's helping them work on their current game, Tacoma, which looks pretty good, actually. So I wish her the best of luck there for that. And she's also pretty great on Twitter, and I'm sure I'll give her her handle, in the show notes or something. She's just a very happy, adorable person who enjoys selfies and is just a total complete dork. So which is always a good thing. But yeah, this game is a very personal game, clearly from her heart, clearly from her background. It's about a girl who played by her, who finds out she currently is having a online relationship with a person across the country as they're playing this MMO hack and slash game. And the strength of the game is the writing. It's the two of these characters. They both have awkward, real conversations, and sometimes
very naturalistic.
Very naturalistic, yes. Sometimes it's a bit much. Sometimes you just want to scream at the guy, like, God, you're being an idiot. Please stop. Just, my God. This is a very personal piece. I mean, the game is not going to be for everyone. And the game itself, the MMO they play in, it's not great. I mean...
I think it's purposely not great, right? It's supposed to be this sort of mindless thing that you do in the background while you experience the meat of the narrative.
Right, where you're answering emails or like listening to the talk, the back and forth and such. And actually, it's kind of funny because when I was reading about this after I finished it, I didn't realize I could actually reply to the emails that my friends were sending me. So it's like I feel like I missed something out there. That kind of sucks actually. But no, it's but you're not punished for avoiding your friends who all sound like very irritating. Oh no, my boyfriend is being terrible to me now. But again, this is all very realistic sounding, which is a very there. The game actually, it's a combination of voice work, like actual cinema sequences where Nina herself is like photographing herself and doing this and doing that, and I think it's a really solid presentation for such a small team and a really unique experience altogether. It's not something that I would totally recommend because it is at full price, roughly $9, and again, Wow. It's an hour and a half, 2 hours. But this is often a humble bundle type of game, and I think we should support games like this. I mean, this is like, again, a very personal game. She clearly tried very, very hard. It's a lot of fun. It's very interesting. I was very happy upon playing it. So it's, again, I know social media was sort of around 2009, but this is kind of this game is kind of a throwback in a way to the days where something
the days
like
when social media wasn't so prevalent.
right
When
where
people didn't live their lives on Facebook.
where you could go on World of Warcraft or whatever. In fact, I believe Nina has mentioned that her experiences on this are based on her time with Final Fantasy 11, I believe.
Okay.
So
the other MMO.
Yes.
I don't know about that. My experience with that was if you didn't speak Japanese, you just kind of sat in a corner by yourself in that game. I don't know if you guys remember how Final Fantasy 11 launched, but
I don't remember this.
they gave the Japanese folks about a 7-month head start, which in MMO is a lifetime. So you're running around and they kind of had one of those like weird translation systems. Oh man, and it was rough because like they would just basically say like follow, and then they would just link you the chain they wanted you to do, but you couldn't talk to each other. So yeah, but if she found anybody else that she could talk to in Final Fantasy 11, she must have been doing something right.
Yeah, preferably
You're a really gifted player. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of not totally, but it kind of reminds me of Her Story. Did any of you guys play that game?
I'm
I did play
working
Her
on.
Story.
I'm going to play that eventually, but yeah, it is. I do have it, and again, I think I'm just going to sit down and start playing these smaller games, kind of like just to clear my head rather. And
It's a really interesting sounding game, but man, $9 for an hour is. I mean, that's kind of not that length is all that matters, but that to me kind of seems more like a $5 price point from most games. But if I see it on Humble Bundle or sale, I'll definitely pick it up.
Yeah,
I do think there's a lot of production value to this game, so I can understand the price a little.
It did take, like, they do have to film all the sequences, and they did it professionally with cameras and all that. So the money is on the screen. It's
Sure.
just it is a short game. Another game that's very similar that reminds me of is this short, free bit of interactive fiction called Emily is Away, and it's the same sort of deal with people who documenting college friendships. In this case, instead of through an MMO, it's through MSN Messenger. If you guys remember that.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
I was an AIM man myself, but
Yeah, MSN Messenger was for people my age growing up on the internet, and it very much captures the same sort of sentiments.
I'll be older than you and say ICQ was mine for a while.
Oh wow!
Anyway, carry on.
generational chat programs.
Yeah, we could go back through the archival chat programs. Yeah, so that's really interesting. Anything else you've been playing, PT?
Well, the main event is of sorts, and I hope to kind of tie this in with your Deus Ex discussion, because I know you two have been playing it.
Hope you're sitting down.
Well, let me talk about this thing first here.
For this.
Okay, so I recently tried to restart Shin Megami Tensei 4. It's a 3DS exclusive, a part of that series. It's kind of the mainline level of that series, while the Personas and the Digital Devil Sagas and the Devil Summoners are all like little, chains of their own. But this is essentially correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe this is a sequel to Nocturne, which was apparently Shin Megami Tensei 3. That was for the PS2.
So, from what I read about the main series of Shin Megami Tensei, so the main 4 games,
Yeah.
2 is a sequel to 1. Nocturne introduces. I haven't played it, but I've read that Nocturne introduces some sort of multiverse kind of deal. So 4. So I guess 4 is sort of not a retelling, but it's only loosely connected, I think. With certain the events of the other game don't affect 4, but there's familiar characters such as Yahweh, Lucifer, 4 archangels.
Oh, sure.
Wikipedia also tells us there was something called Strange Journey between Nocturne and 4.
Which was DS, yeah. And, Actually, it's funny because one of on the Strange Journey cover, there's like this robot armor guy, and one of the notable characters in Shin Megami Tensei 4 wears that armor. So I don't know if that's a tie-in or not, but
It might be an Easter egg. Who knows?
but anyhow,
Easter egg.
yeah, an Easter egg of sorts. Yeah, but anyhow, this game is a very hardcore JRPG of sorts. I mean, it requires you to be very, very smart with party stuff. Building up your demons, fusing them, making sure affinities are such and there. And the game essentially hates you the first few hours. I mean, because you have limited items, limited cash, limited demons. It's actually pretty tough for a while. There are 2 roadblocks of sorts, bosses wise, and once you get into the city, like the underground city, which is basically Tokyo after demons took over, and that's not much of a spoiler. It's just bound to happen.
Yeah, it's Shin Megami Tensei. Demons all over the place.
Yeah, so then the game opens up dramatically, and you have a lot more choice there. But that leads me to one of probably the biggest flaw of this game altogether, is that the overworld navigation when you're traveling around Tokyo is terrible. It's the worst, and I don't understand it at all. But so I mean, I understand that they're trying to divide the cities so you don't immediately go to Shibuya or somewhere else, which is where I'm currently at in my game, which is 4 or 5 towns into Tokyo at this point. But it's just roads are broken and they're very confusing layouts, and sometimes when you fight a monster on there, you accidentally turn yourself around and oops, now you're going backwards, and oops, the monster respawned, and but the core of the game, though, is very, very good. There's a lot of enjoyment that comes out of making the perfect sort of demon, making sure they have all the elements and such, but that's it's typical road JRPG grinding of sorts there, and the story is fine. I know that some people have kind of criticized, maybe more series regulars kind of criticized it being kind of basic, but it does a job. I mean, it's clear that the people you're working for are not the most up and up, and when you go to Tokyo, you realize that very quickly. And actually, the game has, to my knowledge, 3 endings. It's either 3 or 4.
4.
4. Yeah. 4 is nothing, right? Because it's law.
So there's 4 endings. So the 3 actual endings are law, chaos, and neutral. But then there's, at one point in the game, you essentially, I guess this is slightly spoilery, but you can essentially destroy everything. This ending, and if it does that, it causes something of an early ending. I think that is how I ended my first run. I was around level 50, I think. Where when I actually beat the game, when I got the law ending, I was around level 80. I can't remember how many hours difference though.
So really early end, it seems.
Yeah. Essentially what it's good for is it's good for getting the new game plus earlier.
Right.
There's more quests in New Game Plus, and the other thing is New Game Plus lets you carry over some app purchases. So future playthroughs do have less app grinding.
I was going to mention those endings though because they're. I mean, I pulled up a guide on this because I heard that you have to be very strict with your choices throughout the game. There are a lot of text tree choices where you can be, good or bad or neutral, and there aren't a lot of neutral choices. I mean, you will do things and you will have a meter that comes up. You can't actually view this meter. The only way you can view it, from what I was reading, is that there's a guy in the bar that will either say that, oh, people think you're nice, or people think you're kind of crazy, or I'm not sure if I don't know what people think about you, which is neutral. And neutral is actually, I forgot what the numbers was. It's it's between like karma levels of +6 and I believe -6. So it's like super narrow.
Yeah, I think it goes to like +100, -100.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
You basically have to be like canceling out every decision you make one way or another.
Right.
But and different decisions have different. So essentially, you need a guide. I've read of people getting lucky, but if you want neutral, use a guide.
Yeah, that's what I've gathered. And neutral, to my knowledge, actually unlocks an additional dungeon at the end, which is kind of another reason why you might want to do that. But as such, there. But that's kind of typical JRPG stuff as well. It's kind of like hiding stuff behind, weird closed doors. But the thing that I actually did, and I don't tend to do this actually, is I bought 2 of the DLC booster packs. One to get money and one to get the app points, the skill points, if you will, because maybe I'm just becoming too old here, but I just did not have the patience to, just sit there and level up a lot and grind up those app points, because there are a lot of cool little features, that you can do during battle that are hidden behind those app skills, like negotiating, demons, to heal you or give you money, or just not have them not kill you and have them run away, or lots of cool little things like that. And they're hidden behind these very high, app points requirements. And
Yeah. Grinding to get there can be frustrating, and I'll have something to say about grinding in a little bit. But definitely, sometimes you just wish that you could skip the fighting the really easy mooks over and over and over again, so you can get to the good stuff.
And I feel like I'm a little overpowered now, because I didn't buy the experience booster for reasons that, like, I just didn't want to be level 99 like 10 hours into the game. Like, that's kind of stupid, and you probably shouldn't do that unless it's a new game plus. But I think I made the right decision though with the money and the app points, because at least with the money I can just sit there in the demon summoning room and just like mix and match and not be afraid I'm like losing money, because, oh cool, let's try this one. Or it's actually one of the really interesting things is that within that system there's a really fun search tool where you can like put all these filters down and say, you want this particular demon to merge with whatever, or I want this particular demon. Like, tell me which monsters from my collection I can merge with others to make this demon. And make sure, like, oh, you want one that's immune to electricity. Okay, let's try this. I mean, it's very, very useful. It sort of helps in the mild obsession of sorts, where you kind of want to build your character. I mean, for example, my main character, the human, has a good chunk of the elemental spells, and he has a really high healing spell, and it's all because I was training these monsters and transferring skills to him. So you
got like this one really good character that you.
Well, they're all good. They're all good. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, the MC used to be really, really weak, and now he's can pretty much fight off the whole thing at once. Including one of my favorite things to do is for boss fights is to cast a spell which deflects all physical attacks for one turn. So bosses will just unleash heavy physical attacks that usually annihilate you if you're not careful, and it'll just repel and damage them heavily. And I'm like, ha ha ha, that's you suck, I guess.
And he loses his turn.
Yeah,
that's always fun.
But yeah, the press turn system. It's
okay.
Right.
But yes, but I was going to say though, but yeah, I'm really, really enjoying this. I might have sounded a little negative there because of the grinding and such, but again, I feel like this game works a lot better on a handheld than a console, because I'm not sure I would have the patience to sit down and power it up and go through the start screen and such. Playing it on a console. Well, meanwhile, I can just put my 3DS in sleep mode, pick it up and play. Just lay on my couch, do all that. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun, and I am going to complete it, and hopefully I'll get neutral. But yeah, that's essentially what I've been playing.
Right. That's really neat that you've been JRPGing with the rest of us. Kappa, I guess you have not been JRPGing?
I have.
What have you been doing?
I've been playing Bravely Second. Yeah.
Oh wait, you haven't. We've all been JRPGing apparently.
I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of reserving my thoughts on it until I finish it. I've got a lot more patience for grinding. Like you're saying, it's DS is almost perfect for JRPGs when you just want to play 10, 15 minutes. I just want to burn a couple minutes at work. I'll load up 5, 6, 7 battles. The grinding the combat and mechanics of Bravely Second are perfect for me in a JRPG. Have you guys ever played it with the Brave/default system?
Yes.
So
Yeah, I did play the first game. Yes.
yeah, so I mean, what I'll do is I'll carefully craft, like the exact abilities I want to use. I'll load up a fight and then I'll, brave all the way through it, and then you can multiply your fights, right? So if you win one fight, you just get 1 times, the XP, the gold, and the job points. Or you can gamble and do another fight. You don't heal or anything between them, it's just like wherever you leave off, and you can go all the way up to, God, I don't even know, like probably 30 times. Just keep gambling, and it's if you get your party set up perfectly, you can just have these like 15-minute, grind sessions where you really only fight one continuous battle, and then at the end it just explodes all these, gold and experience and everything on you. It's a really fun way for me to manage the grind the way I want to. The story, I think, in this one's a lot better than in the first one. It's got the same thing that a lot of people hated, where it does a really smart thing and to introduce you into. I don't want to really call it New Game Plus. I want to call it, like, I don't know, New Game Extension maybe.
It's weird.
I found it. I had to actually Google it to figure it out. So you guys might be in the same boat as me.
Do they?
Yeah, ditto.
Yeah.
Do they like put you at like the end of the game or something, or?
No. So the way the game works is that at the end of every chapter, you know how Bravely the series kind of messes around with time and dimensions and like, what if you'd have made this choice at this time? There's a lot of that in the game, right? So after every kind of chapter, it shows the end credits, like, okay, that was it, good job, and then you have to you're not restarting from the beginning, you're kind of continuing from where you left off, but you're like, wait a minute, we could have done this better, and then you kind of keep moving the story along, things like that, and then there's kind of like a hard reset. I don't want to spoil it for you, but then the game kind of it's not a New Game Plus, it's hard to describe, but then you get back into it and it's like, oh wow, okay, all of a sudden everything starts clicking. In the first one, you know how they basically they put you through that boss gauntlet,
Yeah, that was stupid.
This one's kind of got that, but instead of it just being a boss gauntlet, what it is like, what if this time when we go through, we make the perfect decisions? You know what I mean? So like in the original game, I don't want to spoil it too much. This is like the very first one. You're met by a thief, and I want to say it's like, I don't know, like a wizard or whatever, right? And the thief is like, let's use this water crystal to provide water for everybody who lives in this desert town. And the wizard's like, nah, let's not do that. Let's take this water crystal and study it. Maybe we can provide water for the whole planet, right? So like you have to make that call like right away. Like, do you take the chance? Do you not take the chance or whatever? The second time you play, and then you only unlock one of the jobs. So like, let's say you choose the thief and you kill the wizard, you get his asterisk, you unlock his job. Now, when you replay the game, you get to make the other decision, but the writing's clever enough that it makes it seem like that was the right decision. Do you know what I mean? So you're kind of like going through writing the world. Rather than it just being that dumb boss grind fest, you're basically going through creating the perfect outcome for the world, which is a fun way to do it. It's still the boss modes where you're just going through and fighting, a different boss at a different time. And then where I'm at right now, I'm basically having to fight the bosses in doubles. So it does that thing, where like you get a lot more of the story, but instead of just go fight these bosses just because, it makes sense why these bosses double up and you have to attack them as a pair, because there's an overarching story about a plague that was unleashed and things like that. That really really pulls it all together in a smart way. So I'm actually really enjoying it. I hit level 99, which I didn't even really try, but like I said, I've basically been just grinding. I probably maxed out maybe 2/3 of the jobs.
Wow.
Yeah, and like I said, there's a social aspect of the game that I don't really like. I'm sure it plays much better in Japan, where every person in the world seems to have a DS, But here you don't get the Street Pass, you don't get the the updates, any of that other stuff. So it always kind of it feels a little more stagnant. You have to go on, like I went on like the subreddit and just added a bunch of people so that I could kind of complete the quest and things like that.
And I'm actually kind of upset that I used to be able to do something called home taps, which just, you grab, like, you set up a wireless signal specifically for, street passes to go into your 3DS.
Right.
And it worked for a while, but then it just kind of shut itself down because I think they were using, like, a Germany-based server or something. Either that got changed or something. And I haven't really had a chance to go try and fix it there, but that was great because not only did I get to fill out all my own random European countries in my
Your
Plaza,
Wii Plaza, yeah.
But there's just a lot of people that I could just go play the silly little games with. I mean, that was a quality. It's a quality 5 to 10 minutes of my time where it's like, oh, I'm gonna play, Find Me for 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, Street Pass is a brilliant idea if everybody has it. You know what I mean? But like, I don't think I've ever. I went to PAX one year and basically Street Passed. I don't even know how many people. I got like 500 people with it from that. I mean, I wish there was like a service you could mail your DS to people like at PAX. Just have them like walk around, the floor with it in their pocket once, and then mail it back to you. Wouldn't be a bad business to start up, probably. Pay for your PAX tickets at least. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like it doesn't really work the way it should. But I'm liking it. It's the perfect kind of pop in for 5-10 minute type game. It's very stylish. I like the look of it. It's that kind of anime. I don't know what you call it, like kind of kiddie looking, but
chibi.
Yeah, it's fun. I enjoy it. But most of my time this week has been spent hating Deus Ex Mankind Divided.
So did you end up finishing it?
Yeah, I finished it. And I don't want you to take that as, oh man, he must have played this nonstop. That game is short. I finally got it working after last week's debacle. I don't want to spoil too much to you guys. I don't know, maybe we can have a spoiler show one of these days and kind of just say, okay, look, here we're going to really get into all these games. But I wasn't impressed by it. I don't know how much you guys have read about the endings or ending. It just kind of stops. The game. It's one of those scenes where they're like looking out of an apartment window and be like, man, a lot of crazy stuff happened. Yeah, we really didn't fix all these problems. Okay, sounds good. Roll credits. Like, it's like you don't really.
The reviews for the game said that. I haven't reached the end yet. I think I'm very close to the end. And
well, here I want to be careful, but so I got to the mission you were talking about where you go to that lab, right? And to me, I'm thinking, okay, once I get back, it's going to be a new location, right? Like that's what they did in Human Revolution. You kind of hopped around, you go right back to Prague at night.
Yeah, and you hopped from Detroit to Hengsha and then back again.
Yeah, and no, this game you go right back to Prague, so you play like the equivalent of like a one-off stage, and then you go right back to Prague. It makes no sense. And then, so I'm sure you've experienced the Prague curfew, right?
Right.
Yeah, horrible game decision.
The Prague curfew is one of my, and I think I'm a little bit more positive on the game than you, but I will say the Prague curfew is, and hopefully we're not spoiling it too much for people who are playing the game currently, but the Prague curfew is one of my least favorite tropes in games. I don't like when a game makes it hard for me to move across the overworld. And that sort of echoes something PT was saying earlier about it being hard to move across the overworld in Shin Megami Tensei 4.
Arkham Knight also had a problem with that later too, as well.
Yeah. So when I say I don't like it being hard for me to move across the overworld, I mean, don't make going from point A to point B the difficult part of your game.
Right. Do you know how I got around that? Is I just murdered all the cops, and there's no downside to it. There's no karma in the game, right? I realized
there's an achievement for I think being a pacifist, but if
good luck with that.
Who cares? I haven't killed anyone yet.
Really?
I've done a pacifist run. I mean, other people have killed people because of things I've said and done.
Yeah. Okay.
But otherwise, I have not killed a single person. Yeah.
The people I've killed, I mean, I kind of started that way, but then I started noticing that there was people who kind of died on accident, if that makes sense. There's a particular guard in a particular spot that if you flip a switch, he dies rather than gets knocked out. And I was like, oh, I can either reload about 4 hours of this, or I'm just going to have to accept that this is over. And then that's why when I got to the Prague checkpoint, I know that I already killed a couple people, so I was just like, I went down a little alley, and shot a couple times, and they just came a-running. I just had like a mound of corpses at the end of it. Because at that part in the game, ammo doesn't matter. What gun you're using doesn't matter because it's all limitless at that point. And that's another thing. The inventory system's terrible. Hated that. I hated that they didn't give you. I mean, they gave you some storage in your apartment, but nowhere near enough. And it really kind of points you towards using. I don't know how many weapons do you think you use? 3 at the high end.
I use mainly just one weapon.
Stun gun, right?
I use mainly the stun gun, but I do occasionally use the tranq rifle.
Right. Yeah, and so
I have used the pistol with the EMP ammo if I need to take out a robot or something like that.
Yeah, but I mean that's 3 guns. I mean, why do you? It goes back to one of those things where it's like if you're going to put the effort into the game, make it fun to play both ways. Because stealth to me in that game is you get spotted and you reload, right? I mean, there's parts in the game that just feel really like the timings, the mechanics, the patrol routes. The cameras feel really erratic to me. Sometimes they can spot you on the other end of the map. I never really figured out why. But yet you can use that.
Well, I feel the cameras are pretty consistent. It's if you're in the cone of light, then you're spotted.
Well,
if you're outside the cone of light, then it has. I'd say the cone of light. It goes a little bit beyond the cone of light.
Yeah, I would say a little bit. Yeah, and the lasers, the turrets, all. I mean, it's all there. But I was frustrated with the inventory. I was frustrated with the augment system. I didn't want to ruin it for you when I was talking about you earlier, but it doesn't give you access to a lot of those augments or to as many as you want until so late in the game it doesn't matter anymore,
Right.
There's a lot of just really weird decisions with that game, and Deus Ex really usually nails all that stuff, right? Like it's usually very smart. It lets you think your way outside of certain things and do crazy stuff that you wouldn't expect other shooters to let you do. There's not much of an RPG in this one, honestly. I don't feel. This one to me is way more of a shooter than anything, more of a stealth game like a Metal Gear, right?
I mean, it depends. How much of the side content have you been doing?
I did everything. I mean, I did.
Oh, wow.
I did. I would say I hit completionist run in about 24 hours.
Okay. This is taking me much longer than Human Revolution. I was completionist of both. Human Revolution took me, I believe, 25 hours to do.
Yeah.
Here I'm about to hit 40.
But you're also not killing people. So I mean, there was
Right.
I would say I probably made it through about 85% of the game not killing people. But there would just be times where I'm like, look, especially like in that lab. I was like, all right, forget this room. Like everybody in this room's gonna die. I've got so much combat rifle ammo. Somebody needs to get some in the head.
Yeah, that's a useful way to do it. I'm not going to spoil how I snuck out of that base for people who want to discover themselves. But there's a neat thing you can do with the hangar. To traverse the hangar that you wouldn't necessarily think you could do.
There's stuff there. I don't know. I know I sound like I'm really negative on it. I'd say it's like a C+ game. The DLC might be able to bump it up in some ways, but it just
for me, it's a game that I think is very good, but also simultaneously very disappointing.
Well, I can't get past that. I hate Adam Jensen. I just can't get over it. I just think he's just a shitty protagonist. I mentioned in comments earlier that like he bumped off Geralt from my world's most boring protagonist, and I really feel that about Adam Jensen. There's nothing to him. He doesn't even really seem to give a shit about his old girlfriend. He doesn't really seem to give a shit about his boss. The guy has no connections to anyone. He's like
he seems ultra dickish to Sarah for no reason in this game.
Yeah, and because that's not how my story ended with Sarah. I mean, we were kind of buds, and then he doesn't really make any real efforts to connect with anybody back from the last game. I don't know. I mean,
honestly, I'll say this game's biggest problem to me is that it forgets. I shouldn't say it forgets. It's too vague, obtuse, and subtle about its own history.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's not. It feels like definitely everything that happens in Mankind Divided is a logical follow up to what happens in Human Revolution, but they don't illustrate the links very well.
Yeah.
It feels like the game is forgetting its own history.
It feels like they didn't want to do the effort of something like maybe like a Dragon Age would do, and like import a save, you know, or like it didn't want to go that extra mile. It just wanted to leave everything kind of vague, like, oh man, that was some crazy stuff that happened 2 years ago. Yep. Where's all the people from the events of 2 years ago? Well, you're not going to see them in this game, so we'll just say they're all in Germany, you know, or whatever.
I mean, it does go, and not to talk way too much about Deus Ex. We're going to get into this a little bit later, but it also has problems on a thematic level, for how they're trying to relate the events of the game to issues of discrimination.
Right.
I mean, very clearly, the game sets up this dichotomy between, you know, Augs and Naturals, and Augs are discriminated against by the natural people, or the non-augmented people, and that sort of discrimination feels, the way the game displays it, feels in a sort of twisted way kind of justified, because it emphasized that these people went on this dangerous rampage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it almost makes it feel as if these people all became voluntarily augmented. They're all these idiots who bought these implants just because they could, and then they got screwed by that, and it's all their own doing. But it leaves out all the issues about how it was, you know, the working class who got these augments so they could compete in blue-collar jobs.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a very important part of human revolution. And to not really address that and sort of relegate it to a few books here and there that you can find scattered throughout the game feels like a huge misstep to me.
Yeah, and what you're saying too is kind of hinted at in the game, but it never really gets it. What's the name of that like that Aug Utopia or whatever that area?
Rabia.
Yeah, and you never go there. That's got to be the DLC, right? I mean,
that's from what I've heard, based on what I've heard about how Square Enix managed the franchise, it seems that's going to be the sequel.
Oh
right?
man, are you kidding me?
It feels like they've cut up into multiple games that was really meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's just so many parts that I don't know. It feels like either they left the door open for sequels or DLC or something. But it's one of those games when you get to the ending, you just go, "That's it." Like that's not where you want to leave a game, right? I mean,
right.
even in the best of ways, just going, all right, that's it. Okay, cool. Later. Can you name any of the side characters in that game besides maybe Miller?
Yeah, McCready, Aria Argento, Dr. Arzen.
Okay, Aria was she the last one?
Aria's the one who stands, the augmented lady.
Okay.
Standing in front of the combat training room.
I mean, it's they just all kind of felt there. I don't know, like there wasn't like any NPCs like in Human Revolution that I bonded with. Like who was
Pritchard and Malik.
Pritchard, yeah, exactly. Like Pritchard and Megan, like you felt like they were like part of your team. Even the pilot in this game, the pilot in Human Revolution was awesome. You know, she was always kind of making snarky little remarks, and the pilot in this one's just like, all right, I'll drop you off. Do you think you're ready?
Yeah, Duquesne's. Yeah, they have something set up where he's kind of a dick to you, but not really, and it doesn't feel like they went one way or the other with it.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing. Thematically, I thought this was really cool, and this was a smart thing that they did. Whenever you go through the normals side of the checkpoints or the subways, they stop and check your papers, right?
Right.
And it's just a little annoyance, but it adds up so much, and you're like, God, this is so annoying. And then you start to realize, wait a minute, like this is like what people, you know, have to go through sometimes in certain spots, you know, to check their papers and make sure they're one of the good or the, you know, however you want to put it. But it really translates that annoyance well, even though it's very minor for the player to be like, okay, this is what it feels like when you're always the bad guy, even though they always look at your papers like, oh my God, you're a badass, keep going. Yeah.
Right. I think, in fact, and some people have criticized it for not putting you in the augmented shoes that well.
Right.
But I think it underscores just how lucky Jensen is not to be like the others.
Yeah.
And that to me works very well.
It's yeah. A lot of weird decisions. I don't know. I mean, I'm probably way too negative on it than I really should be. It was an enjoyable game, like I said. I'd give it like a C minus, but Deus Ex is one of those franchises that I really hold, you know, very near and dear and to a higher standard, I think, than usual. And Human Revolution to me was such a great return that this one feels like the best DLC possible for Human Revolution.
It feels like more Human Revolution, and at least what I'll say about it is that at least it is an Invisible War.
Yeah.
But to carry on with other odd things about you,
I gave you the segue right there, man. And then
I'm sorry. Sometimes I see the opportunity and then I just bat it away. I get an own goal. I'm mixing my sports metaphors now. It's all good. So you gave me the segue. You're talking about other problems that Mankind Divided has. One issue that's come up in the discussion surrounding Mankind Divided is that it has microtransactions.
In a single-player game. That's, yeah.
Microtransactions as a single-player game. So let me distinguish between the two sorts of microtransactions it has. First of all, there's the separate mode called Breach Mode, which works as a sort of like bonus game where you go into these highly stylized quasi-Tronish sort of environments, where you go, where the point is to obtain data and leave, and you can pay for items in that game with microtransactions, and there's a sort of bonus currency that you can buy. It's your typical free-to-play game mechanics. And then there are also microtransactions in the main game. You can pay for practice kits and things like that.
Skill points,
practice
basically.
Kits being like the skill points that you use to give yourself new skills or new augs in this game. So how do you guys feel about Kappa first? How do you feel about microtransactions in Deus Ex?
Well, here's the thing. I play on PC right now, right? And I want to say probably my first post on the Avocado was about how much I love Cheat Engine. I am an unrepentant cheater. I feel like if it's a single-player game and you're going to put up artificial barriers to me having fun or enjoying the game, I'm going to jump over those hurdles like as fast as I can. One of the first things I did with Deus Ex is cheat myself Praxis kits. Because I want to make my Jensen the way I want to. The Praxis kits feel very artificial to me, the way they have you upgrade, right? The barrier, there's almost like a finite amount of XP, but you can grind, I think, if you want. But I was like, okay, I want my Jensen to be like this. No, you can't. You've got to wait till you get a practice kit here and here and here. So I went ahead. I was like, I'll give myself 10. That's what I did. So I started out with enough there because it does the thing where it resets your praxis, right? And you can get 10. You can buy 10, or I can give myself 10 with Cheat Engine. Why would I ever pay for it? So that's the first thing. But I feel it's really insulting. It's a really bad sign for so many things when you sell that as an add-on. Not just because it's something that's really should be free, right? I mean, it's just bytes, it's ones and zeros. You're not affecting anybody else's game besides your own. But I don't see it as a positive in a way that you're shortcutting the story, because if you're not going to buy it, you've already paid for the game. You should be able to play the single player game the way you want. Why would you go ahead and sell me an add-on? If you're going to give me 10, just give me 10. Just say, okay, on easy mode we give you 10 praxis. Because if you have the season pass, you get 5 anyway, right? And then if I play the cell phone game, I get another 5. There's 10 right there. Why would I have to pay $4.99 on top of all that? It's just a weird decision to me.
It's a weird system, especially I'm really not a fan of a pre-order bonus makes the game easier for you.
Right. I'm okay with different weapon skins or different cosmetics, but let me explain this too. If you pre-order Deus Ex and you got the skins for the weapons, right? It's like Elite Edition pistol, Elite Edition whatever. It actually screws you up in the game because it doesn't consider the Elite Edition combat rifle to be a combat rifle. So I don't know. You probably didn't shoot a lot, but so let's say you want to go get more ammo for your Elite Edition combat rifle, right? You go pick up a combat rifle that somebody dropped. It doesn't add the bullets from that into your bullet, inventory item. No, it picks up the whole combat rifle, which if you don't have inventory room for, it won't pick up. So you can't pick up the ammo for that gun, even though you're using that same gun. It's just you got a cool gold skin instead of the standard gray skin. So what you've got to do is actually kind of juggle. You got to throw your Elite Edition down, pick up the other one, go around, pick up a bunch of ammo, throw that one back down, pick up the Elite Edition one, reload it with the ammo that you picked up, and then throw down the regular edition one, which is just bizarre. Like, nobody thought to code it the same way in the game. Totally a separate weapon, which is just bad design.
Yeah, it seems almost like an afterthought.
It is. I mean, and there's so many things about this game that felt like a last second as they're pushing it out of the door. Let's throw in breach feels very last minute. I don't know if you got to say it's fun.
I've actually tried it.
It feels very last minute. All of it kind of feels like as it's out the door, some bean counter was like, wait a minute, we got to figure out ways to make more money off of this thing.
That's from what I've heard, that's exactly what happened.
Is it?
Jim Sterling, the Jimquisition, has a video about this, where apparently an anonymous source who worked at Eidos told him that basically as the game was nearing the end of production, they told them they had to add the microtransactions.
Oh, man, what a thing!
The game is actually balanced properly. So they didn't change the way praxis points accumulate or anything like that. They just added in the microtransactions.
Well, I mean, praxis points aren't hard. I mean, it's like any other level in any other game. You can do a bunch of things. One thing, here's kind of the reason I cheated for it, is I was playing stealthy, right? And if you play stealthy, instead of getting like a bunch of little experience points here and there, like if you're going through shooting people, you're getting like 10 for a headshot, 20 for a kill, stuff like that. You don't get your experience till the end of the mission where you get a huge chunk, right? Like, well, what are you getting like when you clear a mission, Merve? Like 10K or something? Like you're basically getting like a level and a half, right?
I'm getting something like, it depends on the mission. It's anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000.
Right, so 5,000 being a whole level though, right? So I mean, as you're playing, if you're going through shooting people in the head, they did balance it so that you're getting roughly the same XP, but you're getting it kind of spread out, so you can level up inside of a stage. Whereas if you play it the stealth way, you're kind of stuck with what you have until you get all the way to the end, if that makes sense.
Right. I mean, there's some ways, like taking out people with stun guns gets you some XP. Knocking people out and hiding the bodies gets you some XP. But yeah, you do get more XP if you're going through shooting everybody instead of leaving some guards alone.
Right.
So PT, you mentioned that you had indulged in some microtransactions for Shin Megami Tensei 4. How did that work out for you?
Again, I think it makes it just a lot better for me personally. I mean, and I should clarify that what you do with these DLC booster packs is you're kind of teleported to this random place of sorts, and you are essentially allowed to grind. And the kind of the funny thing here is that this is not going to be useful for you at all unless you pass a certain point of the game.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just not going to be able to like take out any of these monsters that you have to fight and such. But yeah, like after you've made that point there, you can just kind of like sit here in this little world and grind to your little heart's content, and when you're done, you leave and such and such. And again, I feel that it helped me with the enjoyment of the game because I didn't feel so stressed about having to I have to make all these decisions and I want to try this, but gosh.
So you don't have a problem with the design. With the design sort of forcing you to buy this in order to enjoy the game.
I don't know if they force me as much as I'm just not patient, which I think is better than what you were describing with Deus Ex, which sounded like just straight up, well, I guess we got to get this in the game somehow.
You're basically paying for a cheat code, right? I mean, does that make sense? Like, that stuff used to be free. Well, I think what you're talking about, like the XP boosters and modifiers and stuff, to me, it's a little bit different, like you're saying.
I mean, I think it's basically the same thing. I just think it's interesting that we have different views on this.
PT is talking about with the SMT4 stuff. I wouldn't call it microtransactions because I always think of microtransactions as sort of like a temporary boost. In the sense that like you pay them something and like a one-time only you get this like consumable item and
okay.
But with
right, these are replayable quests, and they were roughly $3 each. So which
they're whole additional quests. They're not just here are some skill points.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, that's quite different.
and you can I believe it's repeatable.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah, yes, okay. I have some other games that are examples of something like that, but I never bought the ones for SMP4. I do plan on buying the 3 of them for when I do my chaos run through, because I think a chaos run through is it might as well just like mess up the game's balance horribly. It'll be fun.
Yeah, I think it's again like I don't feel like I'm hurting my enjoyment of the game in this example. Like it's definitely a situation where, I mean, yes, like did I need to do this? No, but and I guess the other thing is that I feel okay with this because I actually got this game, I believe, when it was like $20. Actually, I believe the retail price in the eShop right now is actually $19.99 as well. So I figured, well, this used to retail for like $60, $70. Like they were being very, oh, 50, yeah. They were like being very certain about, yeah, this is a boutique item and we know people are going to buy it at this price. And, you know, it did for a while. And so, I mean, I bought it digitally for 20, and after I realized, I was like, boy, I want to play this game, but oh, this is so frustrating. And so,
well, I think Keith. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't have the most. I don't feel particularly guilty about this exactly. While when it comes to that Deus Ex stuff, I would be very furious.
So the way I see it is that this is actually adding content. It was actually adding a quest, like a mini quest area or whatever. It's actually adding something to the game rather than just giving you a skill point for money.
Yeah.
That's the distinction.
The closest thing I can make a connection with is I don't cheat in multiplayer games. I really don't. Cheat engine's fun for a single player, but you remember guys in Battlefield 4 they started selling the kits or the packs or whatever you wanted to call them, like I can't remember what they call them. But basically, like if you want to play as an engineer in Battlefield, you had to experience up, and then you had to get lucky with the little battle chest to get the kind of drops you wanted, and then each of those weapons had their own drop. It's like, yay, I finally unlocked the AK-47, but now I need the scope for the AK-47, the magazine, the stock, and it's all random drops, right? And people got so fed up with it, they finally persuaded EA, like, look, just for $5. Just sell me like the maxed out, AK-47 or whatever. I mean, and that's a different style, but that was one of the times where, like you were saying, I was like, it's just not worth it to me to forever grind. And you would get those battle packs pretty often, right? I would say maybe every 2 or 3 games, but I have the way I like to play Battlefield with certain guns and certain loadouts and certain kits and stuff like that. But yeah, I eventually just gave in, like you said. And I was like, look, I don't got the time for this. I'm just going to shell out the $4 and buy whatever it called, the fast track kit. And then they eventually did it for every class. They did it for all the classes. They did it for all the vehicles. They did it for everything. And people hated it, felt slimy. But to me, I was like, look, I'm a busy man. I'm not trying to unlock every single thing for every single gun.
A cynic might think that they intentionally got people frustrated so that they'd be willing to shell out for it.
Well, I mean, to me, there's still a way in the game to unlock it, and it's through a lot of randomization, a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's still technically there, but yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that they probably didn't realize that it was going to have that effect, because I feel like when they test a lot of these games, they test it with, like, that 1% of people who plays Battlefield 24/7, and they have all the unlocks in 2 weeks anyway, so they don't care. But, like, the average person like me who plays for a couple hours after work, yeah, I'd be playing that game, till I'm 90 to unlock everything.
Yeah,
and it's funny because like I guess there is a certain type of person who plays video games that just focuses on 1 or 2 games maybe a year, and I don't think anyone in this room are those people at all. So it's very different from our perspective.
Yeah, for me, like for example, I found the example that's similar to the one that TheKappa was talking about was, for me, Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, which I actually quite enjoyed, and I played quite a bit of it for a while. But what frustrated me was unlocking new characters for that game involved these random loot drops, or these random loot boxes. You'd get loot boxes every now and then, and you'd open them up, and they'd contain random items. And I never got new characters in them, and it was frustrating. So after a while, I was like, you know what? Fuck this. If you're not going to give me more content and you're just going to give me crappy weapons that I can't use anyway for the classes I like to play, why should I bother with this game?
Yeah, and the frustrating part for me comes in Overwatch kind of has that same system, and the frustrating part comes from the fact that they start to relegate all the really good stuff, or like the 100% chance at whatever, into like the premium tier boxes. Then you can only buy with real money, right? So
right. It's to psychologically browbeat you into shelling out.
Right.
And I don't like that kind of system. Like, be transparent about it. If you want me to shell out, tell me to shell out. Don't tell me that I'm going to get this in some random loot box. Let me buy. Like, the worst part is that something like Mass Effect 3 only lets you buy loot boxes. You can't buy the individual items.
Right.
You can't.
Overwatch does the same thing.
Sorry, you were saying something, Stoneheart?
Oh no, I said that sounds frustrating.
Absolutely.
It's so Overwatch has the same thing, right? I only play probably 5 or 6 Overwatch characters, right? But let's say I wanted to get the super cool outfit for Mercy. One of the things they do include is a currency, right? But you can't even buy the currency with in-game money. So you can only buy the boxes. The boxes sometimes contain the currency. Also, if you get duplicates, the duplicates sell for the currency, right? So it's kind of like a pity point, I guess, if you've already got something. But so let's say like the cool Mercy outfit I like is 1,000 currency. I open 5 boxes. Maybe one of those 5 has like straight currency in it. The rest are just random things for whoever. Maybe I get 1 or 2 doubles, but the doubles translate to currency at a rate that's not even close. So like if you can buy 1,000 currency outfit, it doesn't translate to 1,000 currency if you have the double. It only translates to like 200 of the currency, right? So you never really get to develop a big enough bank to buy what you want in the game. It's a really, really, really weird way to do it, but Blizzard usually generally gets it right. And it's all cosmetic. Nothing that affects the game at all.
To Blizzard's credit, I'll say Overwatch, I'm not super against it because it's all cosmetic.
Right.
It's still a little slimy, but I wouldn't say it's as slimy as something like, say Mass Effect 3's multiplayer system.
Yeah.
So those are microtransactions. It seems we're not super positive on those. But, of course, there are other kinds of DLC. There's more substantial DLC, like story DLC. And for a lot of cases, it's like you're mentioning the White March add-on for Pillars of Eternity, Stoneheart.
Yes.
How's that been? How does it compare to the main game? Is it different at all? Or is it like more of the same?
I think so when so I bought the game at release, and since then it's been patched quite a bit. And so when I first bought the game, I thought my computer couldn't run it well enough that I got frustrated and quit. I eventually found out that a little fiddling with my graphics card and it ran just fine. And so that was like 9 months after the game came out. But so each time they released an expansion, along with that release, there was also they added some other new features to the main game.
Right.
But like when they with certain things of level scaling, and like a story mode thing, so that the difficulty is actually really easy on that mode.
That came after I started playing Pillars of Eternity, so it came slightly after I quit in frustration. If I'd started with that mode, I probably would have completed the game. Anyway, sorry, continue.
So when I got to by the time I actually got to the expansion stuff itself, I'm not entirely sure. There's new areas, a couple new features. I think one new feature I noticed called the soulbound weapons, which I thought were neat. And so, but in the story itself, so I haven't beaten part 2, so I'm not entirely sure what I can. So the story itself seems mostly standalone. So it really feels like a giant side quest. They tried to tie it a little bit into the main story by saying like the people originally investigating this, like you're chasing after so the main villains in the organization, leaden key. I'm pronouncing that wrong. Sorry. But like, so you're chasing down the lead, but it doesn't. It feels like that it's a weak way of trying to tie it into the story.
Okay, but tonally and mechanically, it's quite similar.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, that feels like an expansion pack that feels like it's sort of a piece with the main game.
Yeah, it everything about that game feels like a throwback. I mean, not just the style, the everything, but even the DLC feels like an actual honest to god expansion pack. Like, remember expansion packs like,
Right.
what Diablo 2 would do? Like, it's like, okay, here's a whole, you go out there, you do a whole new, there's a new town, there's new level caps, there's new abilities, there's new people. I mean, to me, when you break it down, expansion packs are what I want out of season passes. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
Right.
Oh, yes.
And so if I'm saying that if I'm buying a season pass, I want to see an expansion pack, at least one or two, like what Fallout did. Far Harbor is fantastic. I mean, that's added so much to the game. I just finished Nuka World, loved the whole thing from start to finish. Adds a whole new dimension to the game, whole new style of play. I do want to talk about Nuka World at some point, maybe not now, but yeah, I mean, whenever we get to that expansion pack idea, I want something that's substantial. That's putting a twist or adding so much more to a new game that I feel like, oh wow, this is going to be like a whole new game to me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So actually, as I said back in the beginning, back when we were talking earlier about Pillars, it really feels like a throwback to anyone played the first Baldur's Gate?
No, it's a little before my time.
I've played them all, and I still do a replay of. Well, I would say Baldur's Gate, but the last couple of times Icewind Dale has won me out.
Yeah, so it reminds me a lot of like Tales of the Sword Coast, where like you have it's a bunch of new areas, and there's not really much tying it in story-wise. So it does feel a little weird to just kind of like take a break from the story, but it's like a whole new area, and so it feels substantially new.
Yeah, I mean, one of the smart things that they've kind of figured out with expansion packs just in general is that it doesn't always need to be the new game plus mode. Do you know what I mean? I've noticed a lot more of the expansion packs are like, okay, here's an expansion pack, but it's designed for the mid-range. I'm thinking about a lot of like the Skyrim expansions, a lot of the Fallout expansion stuff like that, where you don't necessarily need to be level capped with max gear to play in this expansion level. It's much more like, okay, we notice this game has a little bit of a sag somewhere, maybe early beginning, maybe right before you get the end. Here's an expansion that kind of covers that gap. And that makes games have so much more of a shelf life to me. It's insane because now when I go back and replay it, I've got a whole new middle of the game where I can just get off that main path that I've experienced before. And I don't know if you guys are like this, but I like to play a game at launch, and then I like to wait for almost all the DLC to come out. Then I play it from the beginning all over again with all the DLC in place. That's my preferred style to experience DLC. So I'm always not just already this maxed badass character trudging through this level 20 DLC. It feels so much more fun to just experience it right when you should.
Dragon Age 2 did that really well. The 2 DLC expansions for that game sort of covered up. I mean, you spend the whole game in Kirkwall, and it can get a little monotonous after a while. So being able to leave the city and do something else in the middle at a sort of mid-range level really freshened the game for me.
Yeah. Dragon Age is another great one because I feel like so many of these great RPG companies right now have this expansion system figured out, and a lot of the shittier season passes are more from like the FPS companies trying to figure it out in a lot of ways, like selling map packs and shit for $49.99 or whatever. Or whatever the hell
the player
Destiny
base,
did.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like a lot of the shittier designed stuff is coming from them, but BioWare and Bethesda, at least in my opinion, have this pretty much sorted as far as getting you a good DLC, season passing it up so you're actually saving a little bit of cash if you're that interested in a game, and then keeping with a timetable that makes sense. Like Nuka World just came out. I know we talked about this in a prior podcast, but that's a pretty long support line from when Fallout 4 was released to when it got its final expansion. That's a pretty good clip, right? About a year worth of expansions at a pretty solid pace.
I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah,
right?
I
If
agree.
you're going to support a game, I don't want a tiny expansion within 2 weeks of release.
Yeah,
I want
yeah.
a substantial expansion maybe within 4 months of release.
But then in the meantime, sprinkle it with little goofy, I don't even want to call them expansions. Sprinkle them with basically microtransactions, right? So you're paying $20 for the season pass. You're getting 2 real content expansions, but here and there you're getting horse armor and a different skin and a different whatever. Witcher 3 had a really good model as well. I don't know if you guys remember that one, where when you bought the base game, you basically got the first, I don't know, couple months worth of little DLC here and there, different outfits, different hairstyles, stuff like that. And then they started getting more substantial. You actually had to start buying them. But yeah, by the end, I mean, you were getting full on expansions. But it was nice that they did that.
Right. It feels like a nice overture to players. Sort of thanking them for buying their game. And I mean, I've never played a Witcher game, but I will say I respect CG Projekt Red's approach to business. So we've talked about season passes and what we might like about them. Another thing that's interesting about DLC is we talked about DLC expansions that feel like they are very much of a piece with the main game. But DLC has also allowed people to sort of experiment and do things that are slightly, say, tonally different from the main game. For example, in Mass Effect 2, I believe it's the Overlord DLC, where you play almost a sort of computer horror type story, which is very different tonally from the rest of the game. What do you guys make of that? Do you guys have any examples of DLC that feels kind of very different from the main game?
I was going to bring
tone or gameplay or mechanics.
I was going to bring this up through the previous segment, but I think you've actually done a good tie-in there. The Dishonored DLC is actually, I mean, other than the first one or so, which was kind of like a weird, like,
yeah, the Dunwall City Trials thing.
Yeah, but the 2 expansions beyond that, which was Knife of Dunwall and the Brigmore Witches, are full expansions. They have stories, they have lots of levels, they were substantial amounts of content, and they allowed you to play as a totally different character from Corvo, kind of the opposite there.
More importantly, that protagonist is voiced, whereas Corvo is silent.
And it's just like, they're fantastic expansions because they're decent priced and they're lots of fun, and the guy, the main character's powers are broken as hell, so that's always kind of fun. Like,
yeah, they upgraded Blink to the point that it just makes the game ridiculously easy.
It's like
at some point.
My favorite thing was like when I jumped 20 stories down to kill somebody and blinked at the very last moment and just sniped him for no fall damage. I feel like this badass ninja thing going. But it was just, but yeah, I think that was an example of kind of both things we were talking about. How
it's both substantial and slightly different.
Yeah, substantial content and also a different angle to the situation at hand. So I think that really, I mean, I liked the base game a lot, but boy, those expansions added a ton to that franchise, and it makes me want to play the sequel even more, honestly.
Yeah, I think probably Dishonored 2 is going to look a bit more. I mean, they're voicing Corvo this time, so it's going to feel probably a little bit more like the expansions than the base Dishonored game. Funnily enough, the guy they're getting to voice Corvo, guess who it is?
I don't know, David Hayter.
It's the same guy who voiced the Garrett from the original Thief games, Steven Russell. Yeah,
they're just
they're
giving
they're
up
really
all.
Now after that,
It's not even a spiritual successor; it's an actual successor at this point.
Yeah, yes. Horrible Thief reboot. They're just really rubbing it in.
Yeah. No, I hate that you mentioned Mass Effect because I'm gonna steal that one too. And I'm a fan, but I'm not gonna lie. But Leviathan, not just Leviathan. Let's start with the Citadel, because you were asking about DLC or expansion packs that were a change of pace. Citadel to me is just exactly what Mass Effect should have had from the get-go. A real time to just experience the friendship, the camaraderie, be there with the companions that are in your game. God, what an awesome DLC. I know there's that little weird shooty part at the beginning where they're kind of unraveling this plan, but I don't know if I could have asked for a better change of pace and just a really good send-off for the way that game ended. I mean, they even have you talk to your mom. If you have that, what is it, your parents are a war hero.
Spacer war hero background, I believe.
And then it takes it, and then so you got this really good feel-good, ending, and then they throw in Leviathan, which is like, not only is it like a foreshadowing of what I'm going to assume is going to be some of what's going on in Leviathan, but it really kind of gives you it's like a lore dump, right? Like you kind of all of a sudden figure out that there's so much more that the Reapers aren't the first thing in the galaxy. There's way more to this story than you even could imagine. Like there's the actual Leviathan race is just this cosmic force, almost like a god. What's up?
Yeah.
I was gonna say I kind of put it off to the side before the summer started, but I am making my way through Mass Effect 3. I know about the ending because it was inescapable back in 2012. From what I've heard about the Leviathan, it sounds like they explained more of the background, and it helped make things a little bit more sense, like giving like a slightly bigger picture.
It does, and I think what it does, I've never read the books. There's very few games that I've gotten into the outside extended universe or whatever.
I mean, I love Mass Effect lore. I've still not read the books.
Yeah, but I feel like Leviathan is the exact perfect amount of lore that you would need to really appreciate the whole 3-game series spanning story. It's just the right amount in a lot of ways.
I've actually not played any of the Mass Effect 3 DLC.
Oh, man.
I played the main game, but I really should go back and play the DLC at some
Even
point.
if you don't, just watch it on YouTube. I mean, because seriously, yeah.
See, I was planning to do a full series run through. I wanted to do it this summer, but I didn't have time, so I'm probably going to do it next summer and just go back through the game because I really enjoyed it when I first played it, and I'd love to experience it again with the DLC this time.
Yeah, I ran through the whole series. Man, I think I finished 3 right around when we started the podcast, so whatever that was. But yeah, I mean, it's
back in late summer.
Yeah, it's definitely the kind of series that the more you know, the more everything kind of seems to be interesting, or at least a part of the puzzle or part of the whole in a lot of good ways. Love the game.
Yeah. So we've talked about more substantial story DLC and expansions. This relatively new thing that some publishers have started doing is putting out quote-unquote standalone DLC, which are basically spin-off games. So Far Cry 3 got Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, Wolfenstein: The New Order got Wolfenstein: The Old Blood, and these are standalone games that sometimes can be fairly similar. Well, The Old Blood, for example, is quite similar to The New Order, but with a twist that I won't spoil. But then sometimes you get things like Blood Dragon, which are completely different from the main game in terms of tone and aesthetics, and maybe just share a few mechanics. So what do you guys make of these? Do you guys have any other examples of these sort of standalone DLCs?
I mean, the first ones that come to my mind would probably be like all the Half-Life spin-offs, like Blue
like
Shift.
Episode 1.
Yeah, those sorts of things. Lost Coast. Yeah, Half-Life 2 would be another one. I know Half-Life kind of... It always seemed like Valve wanted to expand on what Half-Life was because it really got out there. But my favorite spin-off of all time is going to be Halo ODST and Halo Reach. Actually, I used to go to the comic shop of the guy who came up with the idea. I don't know if the idea that kind of... But basically the idea behind ODST. And, having that personal connection really drove home how awesome it was. But then when I played the game, I was like, this is what Halo has been missing for so long, is the human side of it. It played different, it looked different, it felt different. It got a lot of hate because of that. But Reach and ODST are still to this day my favorite Halos. But those are the spin-offs to me that really kind of just hit that sweet spot of doing something interesting with the game and not being stuck inside of Master Chief's suit the entire time. But those would probably be my favorite spin-offs.
those are actually examples of spin-off games that are like full price retail games.
Right.
And sometimes you actually do get stuff like that. So I wanted to ask, have any of you played Blood Dragon, Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon?
Yeah.
What do you guys think of it?
Is it just me who played it? Did you play?
I think so.
No, I didn't. I don't like. It is for a very snotty reason. I just can't deal with Uplay.
That's completely fair.
I like Blood Dragon a lot. I think it does the send up thing really well. It starts to kind of grate on you at the end because there's the no story being the story is funny, but sometimes it gets to stretch a little bit thin. But the way the game kind of keeps it all rolling at a very fast pace, felt fun. It worked, obviously with the exact same mechanics as Far Cry, so it wasn't hard to just pick up and jump right in. But yeah, it was good. The tropes it kind of sent up.
Sorry, go ahead.
The tropes it sent up, I think, were really, really smart. And they did it in a way where the game felt like it was trying to be funny, but still managed to be funny, which is, man, I mean, like, that's a real fine line to walk, right?
It's really a tightrope walk.
Yeah.
So here's the funny thing. I never actually played Far Cry 3. I've only played Blood Dragon. And I definitely agree that I have played quite a bit of the original Far Cry. And I really enjoyed taking the mechanics of something so po-faced as Far Cry, because Far Cry is, to me, the stories are just boring as hell.
Right.
But when you put them in this sort of goofy, neon-drenched world, they almost seem like you're putting these interesting mechanics in service of something that I actually want to play.
Right.
And I mean, you're right that it's the right length, because it's like 12 hours, and if it were any longer, it probably started grating on me. But 12 hours, I think, is just the right length where it's still funny till the end.
Right.
So yeah, it is a really tight, a really fragile tightrope they had to walk, and I think they succeeded. So yeah, we've talked about standalone games, we've talked about spin-off games. Are there any other sort of interesting spin-off games or spin-off titles that you guys want to mention that you think?
I did want to mention that, I mean, I don't know if it entirely fills this conversation, but Shin Megami Tensei 4 is actually going to get a quasi-spin-off, sort of, but, I mean, I haven't read too much. Right? Apocalypse, yeah. And I haven't read too much about it because I'm still working on this game, and I'm going to be on SMT4, but it sounds like it's kind of like a different perspective. It's like it's not a remake of the original, not like like, hey, we added new stuff. Like, it seems like it's a completely different game, but from the same general universe.
Yeah. So from what I read, it takes place in the same universe, except for your characters from the post-apocalyptic Tokyo, and apparently, so it takes place, I guess, around the same time as the events of SMT4 are going on, and so characters from that game are in the story, but it's also it's its own story. It's its own story, and you're playing. And it's not just a different it's not just the same story from a different perspective, but I'm not
different story that takes place sort of around the same time frame.
And I think it sometimes it intersects with the other story. I can't say anything for certain until I get the game like a week and a half from now.
Oh yeah, it's coming out in a few days. Forgot about that.
Yeah, the 20th.
Okay.
When I think of spin-offs, I tend to think of more of the terrible ones. It's because I think of my first thing is Resident Evil, and I know, but how many of those spin-offs have been good?
I heard Raccoon City was amazing.
I'm just trying to think of there was Raccoon City, Umbrella Chronicles.
Umbrella More, I believe, or
what was that Outbreak?
Who even knows what they're called?
So, They try to really milk that series to a point where I don't even remember what is the main series right now. I mean, I'm guessing it's the numbered ones, right? But it's all this kind of weird.
The number one's a shitty too now, so
right, exactly. Really. And I'm thinking of the other one I was thinking about from my childhood. Do you guys remember the Mortal Kombat adventure games that they had? I don't want to
They
say
made
adventure.
one.
Adventure games?
Well,
Well, there was Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero, and I believe that was the only one they made from that
they
line.
made Shaolin Monks. That was the other one they made, where it's Kung Lao and what's his name, Liu Kang.
I think that was okay though.
Yeah, it was all right. I mean, it was you could see, you know how the Mortal Kombat story is now, right? You know, where like you kind of
Just,
do
like,
these like fights through a
over-the-top
plot.
sense.
Yeah, I think that's where they got the idea for that. But I mean, I remember my dad coming home with it. It was probably from Blockbuster or something like that. You know what I mean, I was like, "What the hell is this?" Like, because it's almost like a side-scrolling beat 'em up in a lot of ways, and
It's
you
a
unlock
side-scrolling-
your moves.
The side-scrolling beat 'em up using the Mortal Kombat fighting engine, which
Right.
is totally the most precise thing in the world, and would not at all create problems with movement and jumping.
Yeah, I
Oh,
remember.
yeah.
The only thing I really remember about the game, I guess there was another one called Special Force I'm looking up now that I guess was a Jax one. But the thing I remember most about it was like constantly blocking for no reason. Because like I think block was just hold back, but you're trying to move around the stage, you know? So like you're constantly, like whenever somebody does anything, you're kind of do this half block, half walk backwards thing. But yeah, those were some terrible spin-offs. But there's not many spin-offs to me that kind of jump out as being better than what they came from. Maybe, did you guys play any of the Assassin's Creed Chronicles games? I've heard those get pretty good reviews.
I've heard mixed things about them. I've
Yeah.
heard some of them are good, some of them are bad. I haven't played them though.
Mhm.
I've heard some of them are fairly reminiscent of some of the old 2D Prince of Persia's.
Right, Prince of Persia, exactly what I was going to say.
I was actually going to say some of the Mega Man spin-offs, well, some are better than others. Some are terrible. But I would say, I don't know if Mega Man X technically counts as a spin-off, but that ran for a good while. I really like the Mega Man Legend games, the 2 games, and I'm very sad that the 3rd game never happened, and that Mega Man is still stuck up on the moon for all we know, because that's how the 2nd game ended. And people were just saying, well, he's never going to get off the moon.
Well, we never came back from the moon, and then we got Mighty Number 9 instead.
Yeah, we're going to do that one again?
It's basically a Mega Man spin-off. Let's not have any
Yeah.
illusions about this.
But no, the X games were fine. I love the Legends games. But then you have stuff like, oh god, the Battle Network games were interesting for a little while, and then there became spin-offs of spin-offs of spin-offs of them each other, including like a card game based on the franchise. It's just that series became a giant mess as well. But that would be an example of the occasional spin-off being fresh and interesting. I've never actually played the JRPG in the Mega Man X universe, which is
It's a
Command
Mega
Mission.
Man JRPG?
Yeah.
It's Mega Man X Command Mission. It was for PS2 and GameCube, I believe. And it sounds pretty rote, but at the same time, I kind of want to try it. So
I know
yeah.
the ROM was at least for a time it was a very popularly traded ROM. But yeah, I've never played it either, but I remember people saying it was really, really good for its time. The style is very Final Fantasy looking, but it does look pretty cool.
It's just
Yes.
that I've never really had time to play this kind of stuff.
I mean, if we're talking about spin-offs of spin-offs, the Shin Megami Tensei series is a great example that PT was talking about. PT and Stoneheart were talking about earlier. That birthed the Persona series, and the Persona series birthed fighting game and rhythm game spin-offs like Dancing All Night and Arena. So sometimes spin-offs don't even end up in the same genre. I mean, earlier we pointed out some spin-offs that didn't even end up in the same genre, like the JRPG Mega Mans. So yeah, it just goes to show you can take a franchise and then slap it on some other genre game and then come up with something completely different.
That reminds me of the Sonic RPG that actually happened.
So, I knew that there was a Sonic RPG. What I didn't know was that it was actually made in collaboration with BioWare.
Yes.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
BioWare made a Sonic RPG for, it was some handheld system. Was it the 3DS or the DS?
It's definitely got to be DS. Had to be
Yes.
DS.
Huh.
Okay.
I mean,
do
'cause
you remember what it's called?
The Dark
Oh,
Brotherhood is, I guess, what it's.
Something like that.
I'm checking it up right now.
I mean,
Sonic
BioWare has.
Chronicles.
I'm on the BioWare site and they list that as.
Yeah.
Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood.
For the Nintendo DS.
So they get done with Mass Effect and they're like, you know what? Let's just get this Sonic Dark Brotherhood game. Because it's Jade Empire, it's Knights of the Old Republic, Jade Empire, Mass Effect, Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. They're like, what? And then Dragon Age Origins. Like, you have like 4 of the greatest RPGs ever, you know, and then Sonic. It reminds me of, like, if you guys ever played, like, that game developer, little phone game, you know, it's like, I gotta shit something out real quick to make some money.
I've actually never played Game Dev Story, which I believe you're referring to.
Yeah.
And that was fun to read about for a while. It's like, people just like these sequels.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, it's weird because, yeah, that's one hell of a streak. I mean, you've got Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, Jade Empire, Knights of the Old Republic, Mass Effect, Sonic Chronicles: Dark Brotherhood. It's just one of those does not belong.
Like that is a combo breaker.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, you know, speaking of, it's one of those things where I don't know if you could ever really kill a series with a bad side spin-off game, but it definitely does kind of diminish the brand in some ways.
I mean, Sonic's been kind of diminishing itself for years. But yeah, that can't have helped.
Right.
Because what I understood, it was okay. Wikipedia says it was generally received well by critics, which surprised me because it's a Sonic game. But I don't know.
I've heard like differently. Like I don't believe it's fondly remembered at all, which shouldn't surprise you.
One Up gave it an A, but Famitsu gave it a total of 28 out of 40. And you know that if anything gets below a 35 in Famitsu, it's not worth your time.
Yeah,
because Famitsu just gives 8 to 9 and everything.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if they're not even willing to I shouldn't say that, but they've had their history of fussy reviews on things that may or may not have been helped. And but if your game is rating that low, then clearly it's a piece of crap.
Yeah. Except for to the reviewer at 1UP, gave it an A.
I think it was Ryan.
That's why
Scott.
1UP went out of business. No, I'm kidding.
It was like the GFW reviews editor. Which I actually the games for Windows side of 1UP was actually a lot of fun for a while. And their podcast was really good, and the people were good writers, and listening to him all the time and seeing him write that review, I'm like, dude, what? It's just so weird. But yeah, that review has always made me scratch my head because the moment we were talking about reviews, I said, yep, there was the A from 1UP. I don't understand what the hell he was thinking. It's the most outlier review of any of them. Yeah,
they're all kind of like, this is a mediocre game. Right? So yeah, that's one spin-off that seems really bizarre for a lot of reasons. So we've talked about spin-offs, we've talked about DLC. Are there any other spin-offs or DLCs that you guys want to mention?
I mean, I've got a couple more, but I don't know. Mine are always kind of weird, but
I'm trying to think of things that don't fit in what we mentioned. I've played some games I've played that have DLCs that are sort of like either like really challenging quests meant so maybe they have a little bit of story to them, but like they're meant just for challenge as such. Or so the example that's popping in my head is actually SMT4 because it's been brought up so many times. That in addition to the booster stuff that PT mentioned earlier, there's a bunch of these bosses, and most of them are meant for the end game, and they're meant for the end game. And they do, by beating them, you can make it. You unlock the ability to fuse these bosses as demons for your own party if you meet certain requirements. If you can find the right demons. And the reason why I bring it up with challenge things is one of the hardest, one of my it sounds a little sad when I say it. One of my proudest accomplishments in the JRPG is one of them. I think the DLC is called the Ancient One of the Sun. And you have to fight this boss called the Ancient of Days. And it's essentially if they call it, and he refers to himself as like an avatar of Yahweh, and it's essentially robot god. And
that's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's one of the most. It's also really it's really frustrating. But and I don't like the way the battle's designed, but it's also like one of the hardest JRPG battles I've beaten, so I like to brag about it. It's also not.
You brag. If you beat one of those crazy ass bosses that are meant for people who have leveled up to level 99, then all the more power to you, man.
And it's not the hardest one. It's not the hardest one for the game, and I tried, but the hardest ones I called I'm not even Masakudo's Shadow.
I haven't heard of this.
Yeah, it's I'm not sure how to describe it.
So is that's like one of the toughest bosses, or?
Oh, so the Shadow thing is it's just like this really tough boss. You to be able to beat it, you have to be like max level. You have to have demons that you fused from the other DLCs.
Okay.
Which is also why I'm not a huge fan of that one.
That's understandable.
Yeah, and it's also like it's incredibly difficult boss who have these crazy things, and you have to beat them in like 7 turns, or else it's game over.
Oh, yeah, that seems needlessly difficult.
If you want to talk about a super boss, I was reminded of. It doesn't really go into our discussion here, but I want to point out in Star Ocean 2, Star Ocean: The Second Story, the second PS1. There is the final boss has a pretty normal final boss thing where whatever, you go kill him and that's great and the game is over. But you can unlock. There are things called like in the game there are special moments where you can like go there and privately talk to people and get like additional storylines and such. And there's one where you can actually unlock the final boss's limiter, like basically remove it, and then suddenly he's essentially impossible to kill. Like he becomes like 300 times more powerful.
Oh, yeesh.
To the point where you have to exploit battle system bugs and like make sure you basically stun lock him to death, because the Star Ocean battle system is like a side-scrolling kind of action RPG-ish sort of thing. You're running across a field, and but you basically have to stun lock him to death, or he'll just snap his fingers and you will die. And I've never done that before because I'm not crazy, but that's what it kind of reminds me of. It's just that franchise actually is pretty notable for just insane super bosses, and it's also one of the few JRPGs systems that have difficulty levels as well. And those higher difficulty levels in those games are nuts. Just higher HP, like way less resistance for your characters. Just you can spend a lot of time with those games, and I was never
designed for RPG masochists for sure.
Oh god, yes.
There's one thing I just wanted, before we move on, one thing I want to ask you guys: have you ever played a mod or like a fan created DLC expansion pack that you thought was just at that level of being legitimately as good as something that like the developers would have created?
Yes, I actually have played one. I actually do have something to contribute to this question, because usually I'm not somebody who mods at all.
Right.
But back in the day, I played a lot of Command & Conquer Renegade. Mm-hmm. Like a lot. I legitimately got good at a shooter for the first time in my life. And so Command & Conquer Renegade is themed in the Tiberian Sun universe. But as you know, the Command & Conquer franchise has other sub-franchises, namely Red Alert. And so somebody made a version of the Command & Conquer Renegade multiplayer for Red Alert theme. It was called Renegade Alert, and then now I believe the mod is still being continuously updated. Now I believe it's called something like A Path Beyond, and it was basically a total conversion of the multiplayer mode but with a Red Alert theme, and it was
awesome.
really fun.
Yeah.
I played so much of that. I was a regular in the servers.
I love when people kind of take that and run with it. I mean, it's created whole genres of games. I mean, you could argue that the MOBA genre came from a mod. And I think about like the enemy territory games, Wolfenstein Enemy Territory and Quake Enemy Territory. Those were all mods at first. There was a Skyrim mod I just loved that I just wanted to kind of talk about. There's a ton for Skyrim, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of like really in-depth that add, hundreds of hours, mods of gameplays and whole new worlds and stuff like that. There's this one that isn't that deep that I really loved. It's you guys have all played Skyrim, right? I'm assuming.
I have not.
Okay. Dark Brotherhood is in Skyrim. Did you play Oblivion at all? Or do you know who the Dark Brotherhood is? They're just the Assassins
Don't get me started on Oblivion.
Okay, so they're just the Assassin's Guild, right? You basically recreate the Dark Brotherhood. You rebuild them, you reform them, kind of mold them into your image, and then they kind of give you some Radiant quests, go around, kill random people. That's kind of where it ends off. But there was a mod that basically recreates the Dark Brotherhood. Like you go out and you like slowly move them back to prominence, and they become like much more of an effective guild, more along the lines of like the Warrior Guild or the Mage Guild, rather than just these guys who, you go talk to a statue once a week in game and get somebody to kill for some gold. It was just a brilliant mod because it takes what people love about that game, which is, kind of that Radiant experience or whatever, and then you build the Dark Brotherhood back to this prominent guild. And it was just such a great mod. I was like, I'm sure somebody at, when they finally put that out, somebody was like, man, this is exactly what we should have done in the first place with this with the Dark Brotherhood, because man, it is so fun by the end of it. You've got assassins running around and they'll see you in towns and they'll be like, hello brother, this is the new mission, and it feels much more Radiant in a lot of ways, and I know that's what they were going for. But one hell of a mod. I wish I could remember the exact name. I think it's like the Brotherhood Reborn or Brotherhood Revived or something
we'll
like
put
that.
in the link, Tom.
Yeah. Good mod. Last thing I want to talk about with mods, and this is just my own question. There's a couple games I can think of that kind of exist in that area, and I kind of mentioned it with Mankind Divided, where this whole game feels like more like it could have just been a DLC. Like, not necessarily in a good way, but also, just in general, like Awakenings, right? Dragon Age Awakenings, good example. It's kind of like this weird area where maybe it's a DLC, maybe it's a full game. It wasn't priced as a full game. I don't think
It's an expansion pack. You fire it up from... You open Dragon Age Origins and you fire it up from like a separate menu.
Right. So are there any games that you bought and you're like you feel like they sold you a full game, but really you're playing what's more or less just an expansion?
That's an interesting question, because I didn't buy this, but I've heard a lot of people level this criticism at it. Saints Row 4, I've heard, feels like an expansion pack for Saints Row the Third.
Yeah,
it does. It does in many ways. I mean, they use the virtual reality excuse to basically create the same city and then essentially allow you to do nothing in it except, run around like Crackdown and collect orbs. And I think it hurts the game a lot because I mean, flying around is cool and all, but the fact that there's really no reason to use vehicles at all except for missions is just kind of sad.
Yeah. I just always kind of, I don't want to say like I feel gypped in any way, but every now and then you get that game and you're just like, man, you know what? This is just an expansion that they've marketed as a sequel. One of the ones that kind of left that taste in my mouth, not 100%, but kind of, was BioShock 2. I mean, it's not, what I mean? It is its own game. It's long enough and it's got it, but it really just to me felt like somebody had a kind of a cool idea. Like, what if you played this game as a Big Daddy, and then that's what they shoved out the door? I mean, there wasn't enough in there to me that really, like when we talk BioShock, people talk Infinite, people talk 1. I don't hear anybody who talks about 2 in those same kind of tones.
Here's the funny thing. I've seen 2 sort of had a critical reevaluation in the past couple of years.
Oh, really?
Especially from the contingent of people who are disappointed with Infinite. People are sort of remembering it more fondly, because I think sort of sort of one consensus around it is that it had the best combat of the series. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that assessment, but I can see an argument for that.
Sure.
I think the other thing was the expansion pack, the Minerva's Den, was really, really, really well regarded.
Yeah, people love Minerva's Den, and that's a great example, where it kind of expands on the base game itself. But I really, really felt like at least BioShock 2 when it came out, I was playing, I was like, you know what? I mean, it's all here, but it did not feel like BioShock to me.
Felt like a BioShock fan game.
Yeah, or like it would have been one great expansion, like a full $20 Dragon Age Awakenings level expansion, but it didn't add enough to me, especially once I played Infinite. I was like, man, this is what it really should be about. But yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I'll definitely agree with the sentiment that BioShock 2 feels kind of like just more of BioShock 1. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm one of the weird people who actually prefers BioShock 2 to BioShock. I'm actually one of the weird people who thinks that the BioShock series just got better with each entry, which I think is the opposite opinion of a lot of people. But yeah, it does just feel like more of the same, but with I would argue a more sensible story. But
right,
we don't have to go down that road right now. Anyway, so yeah, we've talked a lot about spin-off games that feel like they're expansions but are actually sequels. Are there any other DLC or spin-off or games in this sort of category that you wanted to mention? All right. Wait, were you saying something? Sorry.
I think it's just somebody like clicking.
I was just gonna say, and like say, we should probably take a break.
We should move on to something else. You're just like doing the subtle hum. You're indicating to me that I should stop talking about this and talk about something else. Speaking of talking about something else, let's talk about death in games. One question I wanted to ask you guys, and I think I've posed this before to commenters on Gameological, is what's your most memorable video game death? And this is an open-ended question. Interpret death however you will.
Okay, I got a lot, so I just want to get this first one out here that I really want to talk about, because I don't know if anybody's going to talk about this one or not, but you guys ever played The Darkness?
No, but I've heard it's a really good game. Okay,
so game basically starts, and this is probably the first 5 minutes of the game. I don't want to spoil too much, but you can sit there on a couch and watch an entire movie with your girlfriend, right? And like that's it. Like she says, "Hey, come sit down and watch a movie with me." And it's a video game, so you're like, "No, I'm not going to do that." Like you can explore around and do all this stuff, but at a certain point, it triggers a cutscene where people come in and shoot her, kill her, right? And I was like, wow, like that's how the game starts out, right? And it's a very dark game, Darkness, I guess. But I didn't know until subsequent replays that you can actually just go sit down with her and watch a movie. I mean, there's still the shocking death or whatever, but I mean, it's just like it's from the perspective of your character. It's a first-person game, but it's just you and your girlfriend kind of cuddling on a couch watching, like it's like a 1930s gangster movie. I can't remember exactly what it is. But it's a really kind of sweet, touching moment, and like it was one of those things that just jumped out to me, like such a smart little thing to do in a game, because of course the gamer in you is like, let's get this plot going, let's get it going, but you can actually take the time, sit there, watch a whole movie, like it's in the game, like an hour and a half movie with your girlfriend, and then the game starts, or you can just be the guy who just rushed into it and forced the, everything else. But it's a moving death in the first place, but that extra little layer on top of it, when I found out about layer, it made it awesome. And I really, really was moved and felt like it was a good video game death to spur what comes on after, which is a mobster demon revenge, craziness.
Yeah, that seems like it. That seems like it's effective because it adds that gameplay element that's sometimes missing from these.
And you rarely, usually when, especially like if it's the death that starts the game, you rarely get a chance to bond with that character, right? Like it's either it's just super sudden or it's whatever. So they had a 10-minute window to make you feel like, hey, this is your girlfriend, you love her, and these assholes who are basically coming to kill you accidentally kill her, and then that sets up the rest of the game. Your character deals a lot with like the grief and the emotions and stuff like that, basically realizing that he got his girlfriend killed through shitty choices of his own. So it's moving in a lot of different ways, but it does it in a smart way as well, because you know what, you can at least enjoy these last minutes with her if you know that exists.
Yeah, so that's definitely a very interesting sort of very interesting death.
Yeah.
Stoneheart, do you have any deaths that you remember?
So I can think of a few plot ones.
Don't have to
one,
be plot deaths; it can be any kind of death. But yeah,
yeah. So
plot ones if you want.
the plot deaths was sort of what jumped to my mind. I guess the first one that comes to mind is have any of you guys played Final Fantasy VI?
Yep.
No, but please go ahead.
So,
Absolutely.
okay,
I've probably played on every device that I've ever owned. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is like probably like the second most re-released game that Square does, with the most re-released one being Final Fantasy IV, which might be the fifth ever. I'm not sure.
I think the original Final Fantasy might be the most re-released, because they've done a number, just re-releasing that on everything. So
It's on like every phone now.
Yeah.
Most likely.
But no, I understand what you're saying. But yeah, I would say 4 and 6 are a close second.
So 6, there's one scene where like about halfway through the game, the apocalypse is essentially going off. And as you're trying to make this like escape from floating island you're on, you're told that one of your party members like tried to provide like a distraction for the main villain, and I think at some point you might be told that you might be able to wait for him, but there's like there's a countdown timer going on, and you have to wait until apparently if you wait until like 5 seconds to go, and you like right outside where the exit point, then he'll pop back up and join you. But first time through, I did not know about that. So that is how one of my party members died. And then in a scene immediately after that, after the apocalypse happened, you have just one of your cast of like a dozen. She's sort of stuck on an island with a character who's important, an NPC character who's important to her, and like essentially like a father figure to her, and so there's a scene with him bonding, and then it reveals that like he's getting sick, and you have to go out and you have to get fish for him, and if you don't get if you just simply go for whatever the easiest fish to get are, then what happens is he keeps on getting sicker and sicker and then dies. But so what I found out what I didn't know my first playthrough was it's possible to get the right fish, and so he'll eventually recover and get his health back. And so the fact that like it just didn't occur to me at all the first time through that like I could have saved him. And no.
I want to say that, I mean, I when you brought that up, it's like, oh yeah, that's right, that scene. It's actually the time that he dies is actually way more dramatic than when you save him, because that same character then like throws herself off a cliff and drifts over to the mainland.
Yeah. I played the Super Nintendo version on the Wii Virtual Console. The only thing that sort of I can't remember. I think something that messed with the drama was the translation, because I think they didn't actually want to refer to it as suicide. There's something weird, but still.
They had a lot of translation weirdness there, like back when in the World of Ruin, they had Tara was like looking after this couple, and they were hiding it very, very carefully that these two had sex and having a child. They were just writing their way around that, and it's just like, come on.
There's a couple different deaths in 6 that I thought you were going to go with. I was thinking of Sid.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were discussing Sid.
Yeah. That and the other one I was thinking was General Leo too, right? Like, do you guys remember there was rumors forever to save General Leo?
Oh yes.
Yeah, I will after the I played it back in 2012, so those were like long disproven because internet was big now.
Yeah, and then sleuths will like dig into the game's code and find out if it's possible.
Yeah, and there's also, I mean, there's Cyan's wife. That's how you say his name, right? Cyan.
I think so.
Yeah.
Like, there's his wife that you only see die. Like, basically, then all the people that Kefka kills. There's a lot of death in that game, and a lot of moving, kind of deaths that don't seem to be, for all the wrong reasons. But the other thing. Shadow's death as well, right?
But that's definitely the first one. I forgot to say Shadow.
The floating continent, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, there's a lot of different deaths in that one. I mean, for such a RPG, I mean, like that usually is kind of Super Nintendo-y. Yeah, man, what a lot of deaths in that game.
I think it's a definite contrast to 4, which had one character stay dead. Meanwhile, everyone else would jump off cliffs or blow themselves up.
Or the one with the twins, right? The twins that turned to stone. Yeah.
The twins turned to stone. The Sid in the game jumped out of an airship from a ridiculous amount of feet and blew himself up to
and
survived. And Yang, the karate guy, got in front of a giant cannon and got blown away. But just oops, he's in a bed somewhere in the Sylph Cave. He's not playable for the rest of the game, but you can get an ability if you go to his wife. She gives you a frying pan and you hit him over the head with it. So it's just like
it would make things worse.
That game is just comedic in how nobody dies, and compared to Final Fantasy VI, where a lot of death and doom and gloom happen.
Yeah, because I played it so many times. But here's my dirty little secret about Final Fantasy VI. I always rename my characters. So like whenever I talk about this with people, like I always forget what the actual names of the people in the game are, because like I'll name Shadow like Ninja Guy, or like just like I'll name who's the thief.
Locke.
Yeah, I'll name Locke like Fart, just because it's funny to me. like when they're singing at the opera, they're like, "What a beautiful song, Fart!" It's like, "Oh God, it's so funny to me." I'm a little kid, but yeah, Final Fantasy VI. I play it so much, I actually do forget what the actual names of the characters are, even though I've played it a ton. I remember Sabin, Cyan. Yeah, there's a lot of them, but yeah, I always rename them.
It's interesting that multiple games within the same series can have such different approaches to death. Right? In Final Fantasy IV, it seems like death doesn't happen because you can just elude it. It feels like
death is a plot device in Final Fantasy IV because it just moves along the story.
Yeah.
Whereas in 6, it seems like death is given a lot of weight and consideration, and there's a lot more of it.
And then 7.
Do you feel that's sort of
7 is kind of the boogeyman in the room here because. But I would say though that the Eris situation it's been so overblown and so overtaken by just general reaction that it essentially does nothing now. So I wouldn't qualify that as.
Do you think that playing it in a vacuum, you would have reacted to it differently?
Yeah.
So,
I played it close enough to where I didn't know about it, and I experienced it, genuinely. The first time I played it, and it was legitimately shocking. When I hear all these people talk about, they broke down and cried for hours. I mean, I'm not trying to say I'm a tough guy or anything, but no, I was kind of like, I remember thinking like, oh, why can't I cast can I give her a Phoenix down? Can I cast her? You know what I mean? Because like in that game, it kind of happens all the time that characters die, and you don't even have to. It's not a big deal. Or I figured, I'd go take her to some machine or something. Like the rest of the plot would be me bringing her back to life, but no. But I mean, like I was more looking for the plot device of it rather than we just killed a character.
Do you think the game intentionally sort of plays off those expectations?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think it does it now because so many people know about it, but when you originally played it, it's like dead is not dead in most cases in Final Fantasy, right? I mean, except for the ones we were
in
talking about in
JRPGs
6.
in general, right?
Yeah,
The party gets
yeah.
knocked out, they're fine for the next battle.
Right,
You have
right.
a healing potion, it's all good.
It mostly reminds me of the anime series One Piece, where early on they had a scary amount of characters not die despite being clearly killed. So,
Yeah.
like there was like one minor character who took a bomb and took the blast like close range, and yet he was okay afterward. And I'm like, what?
I mean, why are you doing that with a minor character? Minor characters are expendable, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I mean, like, I would say that if you were a kid these days and legitimately not spoiled on the ending and you saw that happen, like, if you were where I was when you were 15, I really don't think you're going to have that kind of soul-shattering reaction like people on the internet claim they had. I think it's going to be a lot more, I mean, like, I don't know. I think it's going to be a lot more like, okay, well, I'm so used to bringing people back to life throughout video games that it's not going to have that reaction that people said they had when it happened. Because for me, legitimately, I didn't understand that she was dead until, after the final cutscene and everything kind of showed her being dead. I always thought it was just going to be, she was going to show back up and be an angel that heals my party or something.
Yep.
So,
And
yeah.
insert disc 2, and suddenly you're snowboarding.
Exactly. You gotta take Barrett on a date to the Golden Saucer for some reason.
That's interesting that you react that way, because I'd have thought that playing off your expectations of gameplay would actually make the death in some ways have more impact. But I guess it could go either way.
So I guess my experience, I'm not sure how I would have reacted if to not being spoiled on Aerith death. Aerith. Sorry.
Oh yeah, that's another debate.
That's any case,
Just pronounce it wrong no matter what.
I think one of your characters, the one puppet thing, like the Cathy, that Scottish pronunciation. He, like, I think he does something like a heroic sacrifice that just gets like sort of it gets like it's a video game death, and like just like the one before where it gets like, oh no, everything's fine. He had another copy somewhere. So they were definitely trying to like build that expectation of, oh yeah, that's a big deal, and then so maybe, but also, and I guess the other game I wanted to mention was so I only got through the first disc and a half of Final Fantasy VII, and that's the whole story why I never finished. But around the same time I was playing through disc 1, I was also playing for the first time Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that I might replay. And one of the things I went in mostly unspoiled, and one of the things that happens about right at the halfway point is the main character dies. And so like throughout chapter 5, it's clearly building up to like, it seems like it's building up to like a battle with this one guy who you see like through a cutscene that this one duke that you think is your main character's friend, he's gonna betray you. He's married. Earlier in the game, like your main character's wife disappears, and then she pops back up with no memories as like this evil duke's wife. And so I'm thinking that like I'm getting to like the end game, and that there's gonna be a boss battle with this guy. But then when the whole like treachery is revealed, he just takes out his super powerful weapon and blows the main character up. And then he orders his army to rain meteors down on the rest of your army, and the game doesn't really say what happens to the rest of your army.
I think you could assume they die.
Yeah, well, it's weird time. So essentially the second half of the game, you're playing like your armies. You're playing as like all the characters' children, And so I think because of the ages and the time skip, it seems like some of them had to survive in order to have some of the other children. But with the exception of one, I think one character, none of the first half heroes play much of a role in the second half.
So, you know what this sounds like to me? And this is going to be a ridiculous reference. It sounds like this Bollywood film called Om Shanti Om. And it's a ridiculous movie, as most Bollywood flicks are. But we're going to go down this rabbit hole because why not?
Are we going to do a dance interlude at any point? Just let me know. I got to start stretching now.
Yeah, we're gonna break out the bhangra. We're gonna do it. It's all good. So the premise of this movie is that there's this actor and who falls in love with an actress, and but there's this really old, not really old guy. There's this evil guy who I think was secretly in love with the actress or whatever. And so he kills both of them in a fire. Mm-hmm. And then that's the first half of the movie. The second half of the movie is there's this other actor who 20 years later, who's again played by Shah Rukh Khan, and there's this completely anonymous woman who we'll get to later in a second. Anyway, so this man starts feeling like he's the reincarnation of the old actor guy who died. And so he goes and tries to avenge the death of this actor. And so he ends up hiring a woman who is a complete lookalike for the woman who died in the fire. And then using that woman and pretending that she was a ghost or something crazy like that, they trick the evil man into revealing that he set them on fire all these years ago. It's a completely insane plot, but that's what it reminded me of. That you're instead of taking like explicitly the children, you're taking like the reincarnations of these future people, played by the same actors in this case, and making a story out of that. So that's kind of what it reminded me of. That was a complete tangent that had nothing to do with the death.
I like that. Making me want to watch it now.
Oh, it's an awful movie, but it also includes. It's famous for this one like joke scene because it's kind of a send up of Bollywood films too, while simultaneously being exactly like all the rest of them. There's this one scene where they're parodying this Bollywood actor named Akshay Kumar, who's well known for appearing in all these action films, playing these like really soulless, like standard action movie characters. And he, at one point, sticks a gun in his pants and then like thrusts and uses it to kill all the bad guys. It's really ridiculous. Apparently this is taken like shot for shot from like some weird Swedish comedy where some police officer does the same thing.
Huh. Wouldn't think there's much common cinema there, but I guess there is.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I don't think Swedish comedy is a big market in Bollywood, so this just seems like straight up plagiarism. But maybe the filmmakers are big fans of obscure Swedish comedy. Who knows? Anyway, so that's Om Shanti Om, which we've compared now to Fire Emblem.
Which I earlier compared to Game of Thrones.
It's all connected.
It's all connected. It's all in Tommy Westfall's head anyway, right? Yeah.
So one other one I wanted to bring up, and I don't know if you guys kind of experienced it the same way I did, but Marston in Red Dead Redemption. The obviously spoilers. His death kind of comes out of nowhere. It's not entirely unearned, but it was definitely a surprise to me. Kind of a moving death, and also it really kind of shows the cycle of violence, I guess, in a good way. Because right immediately after that, you play the role of his son probably 15 years later, and go out to get revenge on the killers of your father, who you had previously been playing through the entire game. So yeah, I really liked his. Was it John or Jack Marsden? Marston.
I think it's Jack Marston.
Jack,
who's the
I think
son.
so. Yeah, I can't remember what it is, but yeah, I mean it was a really nice shift there. Rockstar was kind of smart to put that in as, I mean, because you could have just finished that game up as the father, but a really interesting little twist there at the end, just to kind of bring it all home.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a pattern for Rockstar to sort of give you a late game character to play, somebody completely different to play as. For example, in L.A. Noire, it's, spoilers, Jack Kelso. Mm-hmm. And then, spoilers, also in that game, Cole Phelps dies at the end, which is, I mean, a somewhat memorable death. He dies sort of sacrificing himself to save everyone else. But yeah, it seems like a pattern with Rockstar.
Yeah, they like to kind of end on that like sour note, I guess. But yeah, that was a pretty good one. I'm trying to think of any other ones. I don't know if anybody else has any ones, but maybe Sarah in Last of Us at the very beginning. It was a pretty memorable.
I haven't played it, but
I haven't played Last of Us. Oh man, pause the podcast.
It's on my list of. It's on my list. I have a PS3. I have a PS4. Still have not gotten around to playing The Last of Us. I should get around to that.
Yeah, that's a great game. I'm trying to think.
I think my problem with this question, and it's not obviously not the fault of the question, is that I find a lot of deaths in video games to be just like comical for the wrong reasons. Because maybe I'm just the stone-faced jerk who like doesn't take much emotion from deaths and such.
I mean, you can't be as bad as me. I laughed when Mufasa died.
She's a terrible person.
Yeah. I told my friends that, and she's just like, she was horrified with me.
What about something like Andrew Ryan in BioShock? How about that one? Is that
that's an example of a solid twist.
One of those things that was surprising to me, but also, I mean, I don't want to get into my problems with BioShock right now, but it was a little bit aggravating for me.
Because it takes control away from you, and
yeah, it feels like how do I put this? It felt obvious that the game was leading to that point, and I didn't appreciate the game pretending that it was something. Like, I mean, the actual act, like the way you do it, like bashing with a golf club, is shocking. But I felt that the game was leading me to that point, and so I wasn't surprised when I reached there. Mm-hmm. And I guessed right away that Atlas was going to betray me in some way, shape, or form. So I was not surprised by what happened, and so it really had no impact other than the visceral feeling of hitting somebody with a golf club. Mm-hmm. Sorry, you were going to discuss that a little more.
No, I mean, I felt like taking control away from the player was kind of gimmicky, but it was a very visceral death. I mean,
right. And that's what's memorable, right?
Yeah, and the fact that it had all. When you go back and read why it was important, because at the time it doesn't really make sense why his death is important, but when you realize he's basically using you as his ultimate pass or fail, test subject, guinea pig, it's a little bit more profound because he fails in more ways than one, and he's so confident in himself. I mean, Andrew Ryan is, confidence personified, right, in a lot of ways. That his ultimate test, when it fails, it leads to his death, So, I mean, it was a memorable death to me in a lot of ways, and I mean, it was. I definitely kind of experienced it, felt it a little bit more than I watched it than a lot of other deaths, but I don't like that they took the easy way out and didn't let the player kind of influence that at all. We've talked about endings before, and I think these days you got to let the player make that decision. If he decides not to do it, that's where the game ends. I mean, shit, look what they did with Far Cry 4, right? I mean,
Far Cry 4 choose not to play the game.
Yeah, Far Cry 4 is literally a 30-minute to beat game if you want it to be. Yeah, I mean that's kind of an interesting way to do it. I mean, I think hopefully more people look at that, see that around, and be like, you know what? Maybe from here on out, we do give that player an actual real choice. I mean, even to the point of literally not playing the game.
So you raise an interesting point. How do you feel? I mean, obviously the difference between, through your actions in the game causing a death and a death happening in a cutscene.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think it's different in terms of its impact?
Well,
do you feel
necessarily
that one is always more impactful than the other, or
it comes back to like the Aerith death, in a lot of ways, where if it happens in a cutscene, you feel like you're watching a story rather than participating in it. Let's look at the death of what the hell's her name, Kelly Chambers in Mass Effect, right?
Right.
You caused that death. If she dies, you caused that shit.
And you didn't pull the trigger per se,
right?
but
you farted around too much, and
you were too slow to get to the Reaper base.
Right. So to me, that's if you want to look at the most impactful deaths, it's those types of deaths. Those are few and far between, though, right? Sid in Final Fantasy VI being another one, but that's more about knowing about the good fish than the bad fish. But yeah, I feel like those deaths are the ones that are like, okay, screw this, I'm reloading a save, I'm going back and saving this person or doing this the right way. Cutscene story furthering deaths, it's like in a movie or anything else, it sucks, but did any of you guys play the Game of Thrones Telltale game?
No, sorry.
No.
I've managed to not consume any Game of Thrones related media somehow.
Okay.
I don't know how I've done that.
This is spoilers for episode 1, so sorry. Episode 1 probably lasts about an hour and a half.
This is turned into the spoiler cast.
Okay.
We spoiled everything in this podcast.
And obviously they're trying to go with that Game of Thrones feel where major characters die. Like right off the bat, the game starts at the Red Wedding. So major characters are dying left and right. You get to the point in the game where, at the very end of episode 1, where you're dealing with Ramsay Bolton, like one of the main villains of the Game of Thrones universe, right? And Telltale games are all about the choices you make leading up. Don't get me started. Telltale games are more about the illusion of choices than anything. I don't really think your choices actually matter at all. So you're getting in like this square off with this evil villain Ramsay, and I'm answering all these questions. I'm trying to play it a certain way, and at the end of the conversation, he stabs me in the throat, and I'm like, well, shit. I must have went wrong somewhere. Reload it, do the same thing, kind of make a couple of different choices. He stabs me in the throat. Reload it, and then I look up online. And it's like, no matter what you do, you die here. And so it made it feel like I was dying because of a choice I made or because of something I did, but it was just that illusion. When I went up and looked it up, no, there was nothing I could do to prevent this death. So to me, that's a bad example, right? Like either give me the real choice, the real ability to influence the death, or have it happen in a cutscene. Period. Don't give me the illusion.
The first season of Telltale's Walking Dead, I believe it was the 3rd episode, had a very similar huge problem where a character dies no matter what.
Right. It's either, is it the girl that you saved in the store?
Yeah.
Or the guy that you saved in the store?
Yeah, like one of those characters dies regardless of what happens.
Right. Yeah, and so it's very artificial at that point, right? Even though the game is making it like your decision is leading to this death, like Kelly Chambers in Mass Effect, right? We're like, well, screw it. You decided to go around and fart around the galaxy and go scan planets. Now, look, your crew's turned into a paste, in front of your eyes in this horrible scene. In those Telltale games, that's going to happen regardless. But it makes it feel like it's because you made shitty or the wrong choices somewhere down the line. But when you look into it, you go check it out. No, shit was going to happen no matter what. So it's really more of like a cutscene death.
To me, that's a trick you can pull off maybe once. So it worked for me in The Walking Dead Season 1 because I wasn't looking up wikis online or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I assumed that whatever I was doing was of my causing, or whatever resulted was of my causing. And when I sort of learned later that that's not exactly how Telltale games work, that they really were about the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
It didn't really hit me until I started noticing the seams in The Walking Dead Season 2. And I think the seams are more visible in The Walking Dead Season 2, but knowing that these choices were artificial made the seams even more visible.
Right. And I think that's why you're seeing – I think that's why you're starting to see people slowly turn on Telltale, right? Like, I mean, think
it's also the bugs and the horrible ports and all that.
I think people were forgiving up until about The Wolf Among Us, right? And then, like, it was like, in the Wizard of Oz, like, they pulled behind the curtain. They're like, wait a minute. None of this shit that I'm doing for an hour and a half, all this, Bill will remember that, Steve will remember that. It doesn't matter. None of that shit matters. Like, there's maybe 3 endings, which, I mean, if you're a choose your own adventure video game, and you have the same number of endings that fucking Mass Effect has, you know what I mean? Like this, 3 game spanning, like, no, you gotta be willing to actually have more things take place. And as soon as I saw they had actual voice acting in the Game of Thrones game, I was like, well, there's no way they're gonna have these guys record millions of lines. There's only gonna be so many endings to these games, and sure enough, it's the choices matter here and there, but the ending is just one straight funnel. And then at that point, I'm just clicking along to a movie.
I mean, I'm fine with that to an extent, but it all goes back to how good is the game at hiding the seams.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, Walking Dead Season 1, Wolf Among Us, excellent at hiding the seams. Walking Dead Season 2, not good at hiding the seams. And that's what ended up souring me on that game.
Right. And so, I mean, that's why, getting back to, shit you did causing a death versus cutscene deaths, what's always going to be more impactful for me is stuff I did. I mean, I can think of all the companion deaths throughout, like the Dragon Age series, like where if you just do something, you just make that one wrong call and it's like, nope, that guy's gone, or that guy leaves your party. Like when Sarah left my party in Inquisition, I could probably spoil that, right?
Oh, I mean, we're spoiling everything. It's all good.
It wasn't technically a death, but I was like, oh my god, I didn't think that could happen. That's not something that usually happens in video games.
I'm curious because
there's a part where in the game basically you meet the force that's giving you your power, right? The dead whatever it is, Pope, basically.
Oh, when you get into the Fade.
Yeah, and Sarah's like, that's all bullshit, right? Like, you don't believe that. And if you're like, no, actually, that was kind of crazy. You know what I mean? Like your character can say, like, no, even if the whole game you've been playing, like, hey, this Inquisition shit, this is all bullshit. I'm just milking this for what it's worth, You can kind of, I was like, well, the way I'm going to play this character is, like, that's how I'm going to be at the beginning, and then I'm going to have, like, at this moment, I'm going to have, like, a conversion. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, maybe there is more to this, right? And Sarah was like, I can't believe you're this dumb, and just left my party. I was like, wait a minute. So, yeah, she left my party.
That's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
I think I didn't have Sarah in the Fade with me, so that didn't.
That might have been why. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to go back and check my screenshots. But yeah. Sorry, Stoneheart, you were saying something?
Oh yeah, I said my first time through Inquisition, I played this exact same. I played like a Canary who was basically pretty similar to Sarah, so I almost never used him. So, and I think my character arc was kind of like what Kappa said.
Yeah, I mean, Inquisition is interesting that it gives you those opportunities to reflect on faith, and also reflect on how that relates to death and the afterlife.
But I mean, so like that wasn't necessarily a character death, but getting back into that, like the character is gone. Like all the whatever you had going on is just gone. It's a really weird way to deal with it in a video game because. Not only is like, if this person was a key member of your party and now is walking out the door, it can be very difficult in a lot of ways.
I mean, it's difficult from a gameplay perspective. It unbalances your party, right?
You don't have a ranger anymore, and there's whole parts of that game that really rely on you having that ranger. I mean, I guess
and give Barrett back his bow, man.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, there's a lot of. I think Dragon Age Inquisition has more of it. I know there's parts you can lose Morrigan, and I want to say. Dragon Age 1. I think there's a couple characters you can lose in 2.
I definitely lost more.
My first time through Origin, I'm trying to think. I lost Zevran because I never talked to him, and so I never built up his approval.
Yeah.
And so he betrayed me. And that actually annoyed me enough that the second time through, I just simply killed him off right away.
Smart choice.
I'm petty like that. And then the other thing is, at the end of the game, when Morgan asks you to have the one child with her,
the demon baby,
so she can like steal the soul of the archdemon or something.
Yeah.
God baby. And so my my character is like, no, I'm gonna sacrifice myself, and she just, how are you that stupid? I'm out of here.
Yeah, and that's like you lose like probably your best mage right at the boss fight for the end of the game. Like what a kick in the balls that was, you know? Like I had that happen to me too, where she just walked out and I was like, but you are my mage. Where are you going? Come back here.
For me, it was a little more complicated because I was playing as a female character. So she was like, "I'm gonna sleep with Alistair," but I'd already like married Alistair off to Nora. So it's like, I'm not gonna have Alistair cheat on his wife.
Yeah, I know. Like Alistair, like especially because like right around that time, Alistair's like, because I played as a female once too, and he's like, I didn't think I'd like this, but I'm really happy. Honora makes me feel really good. I'm really glad you talked me into this. And then like the next scene is Morgan like, hey, I'm gonna sleep with Alistair to make this crazy demon baby. You're okay with that, right? I'm like, no, I'm not okay with that at all. What are you talking about? She's like, fine, I'm leaving. See ya. Like what a I mean that's a smart ending to a game, honestly, in a lot of ways. It brings me to mind. We're still talking about death, obviously. The suicide mission in Mass Effect 2.
That is a fantastic way to end that game.
Right? I mean, I don't know. I got lucky. I only lost 2 people my very first
I lost
time.
nobody. I was super lucky.
Wow, that's very impressive.
Like I didn't even look up a guide. I just got really lucky.
I mean, on subsequent playthroughs, obviously, I looked it up, and a lot of it is about do you or do you not have their whatchamacallit? I can't remember what they call it.
Approval.
Loyalty. Yeah. So like, do you or do you not have their loyalty is always the first one, and then there's certain people that are better at certain jobs. I always seem to lose my biotic person because I kept choosing
Miranda, and she can't actually do it.
Yeah. But Miranda's kind of portrayed. I don't think that's totally on me because Miranda's portrayed as a very strong biotic, right? Like
I think the hint is that she's a little arrogant and thinks she can do things she can't actually do. So I think I went with Samara.
Yeah.
I think she can.
Yeah,
Samara and Jack can. I know that. But I mean, there's a whole flow chart of who does what best, and I think I also lost the leader of the secondary team. Remember, how like you like have to choose like a
secondary fire team.
Yeah, I chose. Man, I want to say I didn't know how to be somebody who was like a soldier class, and I want to say I chose like a Samara, or actually I chose Morden, and he died there, and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, because Morden has combat experience. Cause I think wasn't he in Solarian military or something?
Yeah,
but he's not actually a soldier.
Right. So I think it has to be Jacob or Zaid, or I can't remember the other person, but yeah, I mean you kind of got to get lucky.
You're a soldier.
Right. But yeah, I mean losing those 2, I was like, man. And then thinking about it, I was like, well, I bet you I can do this, and I ended up refreshing it and reloading, and I think I got to the point where I was just losing the biotic person over and over again, but I didn't have the loyalty for Jack, so I was kind of screwed. But yeah, that was a really good, like, getting back to the deaths being on you, and what a great way to kind of wrap up a game. That whole game is about building a party, right? Like a perfect, like a group of people, a bunch of companions that are going to take you from beginning to end, fight the whole world. I mean, really, really fun game. Start to finish, and probably still one of my favorite RPGs.
Right. I mean, I think that's why the suicide mission has such an impact, because the whole game is about getting to know your companions,
Mm-hmm.
and so when they're taken from you through your own actions, that guilt is especially potent.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the other one thing I was going to mention too, and this is not going to mean as much to a bunch of people, but it's always sad in Skyrim when one of your house jarl, like you like one of your, not like the main character or anything, but like you get assigned that house jarl and you take them out and they kind of just like fall off a cliff or like get golfed into the sky by a dragon or like whatever, I always kind of think that's...
I laugh at those kinds of deaths.
Yeah, I mean it's like, oh come on, me and Lydia to the end of time, and then like 10 minutes later, she's like getting stamped on by like mammoths, and you're like, oh, there you go, Lydia, see you later. It's just kind of like one of those things. Like I've had
definitely happened with me with like Arcade and New Vegas. That guy had a mind of his own.
Like that. I guess that's kind of the pros and the cons of those types of games. And like one of the reasons you can never really take those companion deaths hard, except for maybe dog meat. But you're like Arcade's a good example, or any of those characters. Like Boone will just wander off, and like you'll hear a bunch of shooting. You'll turn around, and like his head's on the other end of the screen or whatever. I always think those deaths are kind of funny.
Yeah, I think it sort of almost toes the line between comical and serious, those kinds of deaths, because they do have an impact because you do get to know these characters, but at the same time they die in the most hilarious ways. So it seems like there's like this conflict of emotions there.
Yeah.
So we've talked about these games where you cause the death versus games where you're not responsible for a death and you just see it in the cutscene. How do you guys feel about like actually pulling the trigger? Like when you actually get the chance to kill somebody in a game versus watching their death in a cutscene.
So are we talking like Spec Ops style stuff?
I mean, Spec Ops or any type of game where we're actually like killing a character.
Yeah, I mean, Spec Ops to me is probably the greatest example of that in a game. Have you guys played Spec Ops? The Lines?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, what a brilliant kind of take on that whole shooter genre. I mean, I remember there's a scene early on. Of course, there's the famous white phosphorus scene, and then the ending on top of an ending on top of an ending type thing. But remember, like early on, you get to a bridge, and the guy says to you, one of these guys, like this guy hanging over here, is a thief, right? He stole a bunch of water and did a bunch of bad stuff. And this guy over here, I can't remember what he did. Like he shot an innocent person or whatever. And he's like, you have to choose to shoot one of these guys, or we're going to shoot you, right? Of course, you can not follow him and shoot the sniper instead of shooting him. But like as it's presented,
it creates a much harder firefight.
Right. So like as it's presented to you, it's like which one do you do? Or later in the game, the scene where that crowd comes out and basically murders one of your soldiers in front of you over like kind of like a mistake,
Right.
And then it's like, and they're like, shoot the crowd, like, and like, do you do it? Those types of. I mean,
usually you're used to sort of following instructions in a game, but here's a game where you can just like fire a gun into the air and they start scattering.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those crazy things where it's like, you're actually presented with the weight of killing people in a video game, which is rare, right? I mean, usually when you're killing somebody, they're a bad person who's deserved it for, forever. But there's not so many games that really put that choice in your hands, and it's like, you know what? Do you want to do it or not? And it's going to say more about you and your decisions than anything else. It's not necessarily. It's not. It doesn't even. Spec Ops doesn't even present it to you as a good or a bad thing, right? It's like just how are you as a person? These guys beat your friend to death. Are you going to just sit? Are you going to shoot into the crowd? Or are you going to, what do you do? And I think that's one of the reasons it's such a brilliant game, and it gets talked about so fondly is because it really plays a psychological test with you.
Yeah, it really brings the impact of death to the forefront.
Right.
It really makes you see that often you do have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Like anytime you say you didn't have to, you had to kill those people, maybe you really didn't.
Yeah, especially in video games. I mean, obviously there's, real life
there's
stuff.
There's games
but...
that give you the choice, right? Like Dishonored, Deus Ex, etc. They give you the choice of being a pacifist. But here's a case where, being a pacifist or not being a pacifist isn't explicitly gamified.
Right. Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
It's a subtle thing that's part of the narrative. You can choose to do one thing or the other. But it doesn't feel like you're being rewarded one way or the other. It doesn't influence your chaos or your karma or what have you.
Right.
Yeah, so to me, that's really neat. So we talked about deaths of characters in video games. But characters die all across fiction. In movies, books, musicals. I don't know why I said musicals, but people die in those too. So how do you guys feel about death in video games versus death in other media? Do you think it has a different impact when the character dies in a video game than say when you're watching a character die on stage in a play?
I definitely feel that, and I think the problem with video game deaths as a whole is that storytelling isn't to the level of movies or Broadway plays or such. And so they try to push the fact that these characters, oh, please care about this character, and when that person dies, it's like, oh, okay. And I mean, as opposed to like a live situation, like you were talking about a play, if that person's, been acting their heart out and you kind of like them and then they just die, it's like, yeah, that's going to stay with you. I think it's definitely a problem with the medium altogether. I mean, just different expectations as a whole, where I think a lot of video game writers want to make you like these characters and have you feel for something, but it doesn't usually work, at least for me anyway.
Yeah, I mean, sort of. I mean, this is an apples and oranges comparison to begin with, but
Right.
I feel like that's sort of comparing mediocre video game writing to really good play writing. I mean, there are plays that are equally badly written to a lot of video
sure.
games, and I think maybe there that's sort of the more salient or appropriate comparison. And I don't know if they're seeing somebody die on stage or die in a movie. To me, if I see somebody die in a cutscene versus somebody dying in a play or dying in a movie, to me that's sort of the same impact, right? Because it's the same sort of thing. I see some NPC die in a cutscene. I didn't affect the death in any way. I just watched a character die in some story that I was invested in. I sort of feel the same way. But when you add that interactive element, it can go either way for me. Sometimes adding that interactive element makes it feel more like a toy, and I don't feel the death as hard. And sometimes, especially if the death was avoidable and ended up causing it through my own actions, it hits that much harder.
I agree. Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I think it depends on how much of a correlation between your actions and the death of that character. Like, if it and it all depends on. I mean, because that's just everything. It's like a good way of handling it, and a bad way of handling it, and I think you guys have covered that pretty well. I mean, I think a lot. I mean, a lot of the games I play, the characters are maybe less fleshed out than like some of the books I read. So yeah, it's a hard apple. It's an apples to oranges thing. So I with all types of media, I read about like online people saying like how they have like devastated reactions to some things, and sometimes I just kind of think, wow, like, are they exaggerating, or maybe it's just something about it, like on a personal level that they relate to, and I feel bad because sometimes I think maybe I'm less likely to relate with a video game, but again, I'm not sure how to do a one-to-one comparison where the only changing variable is the medium.
I definitely feel
that is a very hypothetical comparison. Sorry, Steve.
I was going to say there was definitely the right mood has to be set. I mean, for example, the example I wanted to bring up for a while that I haven't had a big good thing is, so there is in Star Ocean 3, the third Star Ocean game, there is a scene where the main character's parents or their dad just dies. And it doesn't really matter very much because whatever. He really wasn't developed all that well. It's kind of a cheap death and such. But you immediately go into a battle with, these people who killed him. And the song that is used, and unfortunately I can't just blare it, I don't know how that would work on my mic here, but the song that's
also
used,
copyright issues.
right? The song that's used is so out of any sort of like, it's not somber at all. It's just this goofy dance track of some sort, and it's just like it just makes me die laughing every single time I think about it, because it's like, wait, did anyone like play this and say maybe we shouldn't have like the goofy techno drop battle theme of the enemies play like right after a character died, even if it's a minor character? Like that's always an example of just a really bad
That's total
example.
whiplash.
Yeah.
I Go ahead.
I was gonna say that seems more like a soundtrack production issue than an actual writing issue.
Right.
It does seem like there is that inappropriate tonal whiplash for sure.
Because I'm thinking about, back to the movie, other mediums question. In a weird way, even kind of like sillier or shittier or I don't know, not as emotional games have probably more of an effect on character deaths to me than your average movie does. I'm thinking of deaths in like Noble Team in Halo Reach, or like when Dom dies in Gears of War, right? Like those are not the games you play for plot, right? Like, I mean, let's be honest. Like you're shooting aliens and all this other stuff, right? Generally, their plots are kind of flimsy. You just get you to from one shooting area to the next. But I mean, I can remember like pretty vividly like all the deaths of the Noble Team. There are a lot of sacrifices and stuff like that. I remember Dom dying in Gears of War. I remember Dom finding Maria dead in Gears of War. I mean, like those are just examples I'm giving, but I would say that those would affect me more than the average death of, somebody in like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, where somebody just kind of keels over.
Yeah. For me, I think, and again, maybe it's just me that's weird. As somebody who didn't watch a lot of movies growing up, the way like my main audiovisual medium that I consume is video games.
Right.
I didn't watch that much TV growing up. I didn't watch a lot of movies, so I'm sort of used to the language of video games in terms of how they tell stories about life and death. And so because I'm used to it, I feel those deaths and I feel those plot events more strongly because I understand the language of games better. But to me, a movie trying to sell a death, it has to go that extra mile for me to actually feel it because I'm not familiar with the language. I don't really get the shorthand of movies that communicates these things to me. So I wonder if it's as video games become more and more popular, and as more and more kids are raised on games, if we're going to sort of see a cultural shift in the way these stories are told.
I mean, I think it highlights the strength of the medium. I mean, you can build a relationship with a character in a video game, to me, in many ways, way faster than you could in a movie, in very similar situations. I don't know. I mean, I just don't have that same feeling that movies can create that bond, unless that's all the movie's going for. I mean, I'm thinking about, like a kind of movie that's basically setting up 2 hours of killing a character so you feel bad. A video game can make you feel attached to a character in half that time.
Yeah, and I mean because video games do have more of these tools at their disposal, and
right.
Most important among them, interactivity.
Yep.
I feel like movies succeed better in making you sympathize for other people, perhaps. But what video games do very well is putting you in somebody's shoes, like actually making you empathize with somebody and how they'd react to a death. So it depends. Do you want to feel bad for somebody else, or do you want to feel personally bad for a death happening? Is the question that you're asking when you're looking at movies versus video games. So are there any other memorable deaths in video games that you guys wanted to mention? This is where somebody hums.
It was covered about most of them.
Not particularly, no. I mean, it's just. Again, just like I think I'm a terrible person to ask this question to because I don't feel terribly emotional about video game deaths. So.
I mean, me neither. Remember, Mufasa died. I laughed. I have no heart.
I did want to bring up real quick. You were talking about Fallout characters and the like just kind of dying because of random occurrences. One of my favorite like NPC deaths of all time was in Grand Theft Auto Vice City. And this isn't a spoiler. This is just an AI bug. You were supposed to, you and Lance Vance Dance, or your little partner, are supposed to go and do this mission or whatever. And so you're at like the main base, which has this these very large pools and all this such, and you can't swim in that game.
Mansion?
Yeah, the mansion. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can't swim in that game. So if you were to inexplicably fall into the pool, you die. So anyway, we're walking down the stairs of the mansion, and Lance's AI for some reason clips out and falls in the pool. He drowns, dies, mission fails. I wasn't even mad. I thought that was the funniest damn thing.
He just walks straight into his death.
It's just like, but that was great.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Stoneheart, you wanted to mention a death?
Yeah. So when it comes to just like silly gameplay deaths, so one of the things is, as I mentioned, Fire Emblem again. There's I can't quite remember if this was it's one of the Game Boy Advance ones. But there's like this cursed axe that has like a small percent chance that the axe will do like full damage to you instead of the enemy. So one time I'm not quite and also in the Game Boy Advance Fire Emblem, each time a character dies, they have some like preset like quote they have some preset quote where it's either like crap I'm dead or something, or like oh no I'm in any case one time I'm just trying to like break down the wall so my other units can move through and such, and I'm not entirely paying attention to the game, so I accidentally picked the axe and I tried to break down the wall with it. The axe backfires, kills my character, and her quote before dying is essentially, "This is a joke, right?" Like you have to be joking me, right?
It's amazing.
She always say that when she dies, but just the fact that she got killed by trying to break down the wall, I kind of laughed.
Wow, that's awesome.
I laughed too. That's awesome. Yeah, so lots of games where you can cause like accidental deaths for stupid reasons, or especially when you have AI companions that run into battle stupidly, or suicidal AI. So I'm gonna talk about Command & Conquer Renegade again. We all hate escort missions, right?
Yes.
There's this one escort mission in Command & Conquer Renegade where you have to escort rescue a scientist from a base and escort him out. So here's the thing. He loses health pretty fast when people start shooting at him. And I think the developers of the game realize this. So he can't actually die from enemy bullets. They can chip away at his health until he's just got a sliver of it left. But he can't actually die from enemy bullets. He can die from your own bullets. So the challenge is not to prevent him from getting shot by the enemies, but to not shoot him yourself by accident, because he will just run straight into the thick of battle like a complete moron. So you just have to make sure that you don't shoot him.
Huh.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty funny.
That's
like,
awesome.
They realized the AI of the guy was so
That's
dumb.
a really odd design choice.
Yeah, it really is.
The AI was dumb. There's not much they could do. They should have just made him invincible. But
escort quests are some of the worst.
Challenge.
I mean, there's not a good escort quest in the world, I don't think. I mean, I would prefer if everybody went the BioShock route and just made everybody you escort invincible.
Yeah, because sometimes game AI is just not good enough for the game that it's in. Like, sometimes, too many times have I dealt with like companion characters who just flat out commit suicide for no reason. All right, so that's been an interesting discussion of death in games. I think we had a pretty productive podcast.
That's a good one. A real good
Yes,
one.
I think a lot about death.
We need to talk more about death in DLC. Apparently that's what gets us out.
Apparently taxes as well. Death, DLC, and taxes.
The inevitables in life.
Oh, there.
Yeah.
I was slightly miffed when I had to pay sales tax for my DLC on the eShop. Actually, that was very irritating. But
yeah, I feel like. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, someone brought that up before, like how like Nintendo's the only one that has like the sales tax on their stuff, but like I I definitely when I buy stuff on my 360 because I still have not upgraded to a one yet. I definitely still pay sales tax. So I'm just confused, I guess, by where these people live, because New York and Maryland have charged me sales tax.
Maybe live in a state with no sales tax. There are a few of those states, right?
Yeah, Washington. When I was there, I didn't even pay sales tax on Steam and Amazon, which was awesome. So.
Well, that's nice.
But yeah, Steam too. I get charged tax.
I think it's a state by state thing.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like South Dakota, I don't believe has a state tax yet. I'm paying. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah,
That's really strange.
Who knows how tax laws work?
Yeah,
we pay rich people to figure that out for us.
On the on the eShop, I think I've noticed that I'm pretty sure I pay less in Maryland than I do in New York because New York has high sales tax, like over 8%.
Yeah, was it 8.875% or something like that?
Yeah,
I
something
should
like
know.
that.
Wow.
It's New York.
Yeah, I guess it must be.
Yeah. So I think this was a great podcast.
Yeah,
We
great
talked a lot
one.
about death, a lot about DLC. We had this really long tangent about spin-off games. But yeah, we accomplished a lot today. Thank you all for being on the podcast.
Not a problem.
Good to be on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks for having
and
me.
to our listeners, thank you all for listening. We will be back with another podcast in a couple of weeks, and I hope you'll tune in. Good night, everyone.
Good night.